Chapter 1351. This was the first time Lu Yi had been reborn in the Black Abyss. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that he was pursuing speed and efficiency, he wouldn't have had to do this at all, but time was of the essence and there was no time for him to slowly hunt down the Western Side's people. He had completely given up on defending himself and poured all his strength into attacking, so he was powerless to resist the Western Side's counterattack. After all, they were 8 constellation mansions, not 8 little chicks, especially when 3 of them were mid-stage constellation mansions. In a single confrontation, he had killed 4 of them. Having said that, being able to be reborn was also thanks to Su Yuqing. According to Su Yuqing's previous plan, Lu Yi would enter the Black Abyss in an opportunistic way. In this way, he wouldn't be able to be reborn, and if he died in battle, he would really die. However, things didn't go according to her plan in the end, and there were some small accidents during this period, which allowed Lu Yi to obtain the same rebirth ability as the other midgets. A figure suddenly appeared beside him, and Lu Yi turned his head to see that it was Han Malong. This guy was also killed. Not surprisingly, when he abandoned the original battlefield and rushed towards the Western Side, he already knew that the remaining people on his side wouldn't have a good ending. After all, with the strength of the Haitang 8 against the 9 from the south, it was too much. After being reborn, Han Malong was eager to join the battlefield again, but Lu Yi patted him on the shoulder and stopped him. "Wait!" Lu Yi ordered. Han Malong nodded, stuffed a spirit pill into his mouth, and silently waited. He understood Lu Ye's intention. At this time, it was useless to fight alone, because while he was rushing to the battlefield, there would definitely be more people on his side being killed. At that time, there would inevitably be a continuous stream of people being defeated one by one. Since that was the case, it was better to wait here and wait for everyone to die once before regrouping. People were constantly being reborn, and after a while, the 9 from the east gathered on the platform of the camp. From this, it could be seen that the gap in strength between them was not small. Not far away, the 9 from the south and the 4 from the west had gathered together and were glaring at them. Lu Yi and Duan Xiuqin's eyes met and saw the unwillingness in each other's eyes, lightly asking, "Still not giving up?" There wasn't much time left. Even if the southern side really managed to snatch the spirit orbs, they probably wouldn't have the chance to transport them back to the main camp. The eastern side wasn't just there for show. They would definitely try to stop the other side during the process of transporting the spirit orbs. When the time limit was up, whichever side's camp was closest to the spirit orb would have it. Therefore, in Lu Ye's opinion, there was no need for the southern and western sides to struggle any longer. Furthermore, in this kind of battle, the eastern side had a huge advantage. After reviving, they could immediately join the battle. On the other hand, if the other 2 divisions died and went back, they would not be able to rush back. It could be said that at this moment, the results of the martial arts demonstration had already been decided, and no one could change it. Lu Yi glanced at Duan Xiuqin. Duan Xiuqin sighed and grinned at Lu Yi. "I'm not convinced. What should we do?" If Lu Yi was a small human, Duan Xiuqin would not have thought too much about it. The rise of the East was a blessing, and it was also a joyous occasion for the small human race. But Lu Yi was a human. This time, the eastern region was able to invite foreign aid that could turn the tide. What about next time? What about next time? He was a small human at the late stage of the constellation realm. Naturally, he would not be convinced that he was suppressed by an early-stage human in this kind of battle. Lu Yi nodded. "Then we can only beat him into submission." Duan Xiuqin said, "So, what comes next has nothing to do with the fight for the spirit orb. It's just a simple battle." No matter what, he had to kill Lu Yi head-on once and let him know that the small humans were not useless. As soon as he finished speaking, his expression turned serious. His figure flickered as he charged toward the eastern barracks and shouted, "Kill!" 12 figures followed closely behind him. With the other party's attitude, the eastern side could only meet them head-on. Duan Xiuqin's target was only Lu Yi. He did not care about the others at all. Moreover, with the current lineup of the southern and western tribes, he did not need to pay attention to the others. As long as he focused on Lu Yi, the remaining people were nothing to be afraid of. Lu Yi sensed his intention and dashed out to meet him. Duan Xiuchen's eyes were filled with fighting spirit and killing intent. It looked like a fierce battle was about to break out. However, just as the two figures were about to collide, Lu Yi suddenly turned and swept past from the side. Duan Xiuchen was stunned. He could not stop him in time. When he turned back to look, Lu Yi was already in front of a stunned early-stage constellation realm cultivator. With a raise of his hand, his saber fell, annihilating all life. F***CK. Duan Xiuchen could not hold back and cursed. He quickly turned around and gave chase. However, one step too late. Lu Yi was like a tiger in a flock of sheep and began a massacre. Golden body talisman, golden body talisman. Duan Xiuchen roared. He could see that there was something wrong with Lu Yi's saber. This unassuming black saber had an unimaginable sharpness. It was not something that an early-stage constellation realm cultivator's protective spirit energy could block. Only the golden body talisman could block it. With his reminder, everyone hurriedly activated their golden body talismans to protect themselves. Then, Duan Xiuchen saw an unbelievable scene. An early-stage constellation realm cultivator that Lu Yi had gotten close to was clearly protected by a golden body talisman, but he was still able to break through his defenses with one slash and kill him with two slashes. The talismans of the homunculus race were very interesting. The biggest difference between them and the talismans made by other races was that the talismans of the homunculus race could be nurtured with the help of one's own blood essence or spirit force. The longer it was nurtured, the more powerful it would become until it reached its limit. The talismans refined by other races basically did not have this characteristic. Therefore, the hominid race's talismans were highly sought after in the entire universe. However, the hominid race's talismans would not be casually leaked. It was also very difficult for others to obtain them. Lu Yi had previously killed an early-stage constellation realm cultivator with a golden body talisman. That time, he had slashed 3 times because that was a golden body talisman that had been nurtured for 30 years. However, it was different this time. The opponent's golden body talisman was not as powerful as the previous one, so its defense was naturally weaker. The main reason was that they had fought too many battles. The 3 hominid races' powerful talismans were almost used up, so they could only use some inferior talismans. This made it even more convenient for Lu Yi to kill. Taking advantage of this moment of delay, Duan Xiuchen finally caught up to Lu Yi. He swung his fists and enveloped Lu Yi in his fist attacks. He shouted, "You're despicable!" Just now, he thought that Lu Yi wanted to compete with him. Who would have thought that this guy would make a feint and attack his own subordinates? This was too shameless. With Lu Yi's killing speed, if he did not hold him back, it would not be long before he would be alone. Realizing this, Duan Xiuchen naturally did not hold back and went all out. Although he had consumed a lot of spirit energy, it was not to the extent that it would affect the limits of his strength. In the short term, his strength would not fall. However, after exchanging blows, he was shocked to discover that Lu Yi's strength was unexpectedly strong. He faintly felt that he was at a disadvantage. All this time, he had never fought Lu Yi head-on like this. He originally thought that no matter how powerful this guy was, he would at most have the strength of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. However, it seemed that this was not the case at all. After exchanging blows for a while, Duan Xiuchen was forced back by a slash. Lu Yi had no intention of tangling with him and turned to kill another mid-stage constellation realm cultivator. Duan Xiuchen chased after him and shouted, "Don't kill my people anymore." However, just as he shouted this, the mid-stage constellation realm cultivator's blood dyed the void and he was reborn. Lu Yi was not the only one who was reborn, but also the people from the east. However, the greatest advantage of the east was vividly displayed at this moment. After being killed, they could immediately rejoin the battlefield. Therefore, as far as the eye could see, the east's reinforcements seemed to be endless. In the misty space, the 3 tribes had not communicated with each other for a long time. After the east seized the 4th spirit ball, the southern and western tribes Rizhao seemed to have become mute. He was no longer as relaxed and happy as before. Chen Xianhai and the others did not speak, mainly because no one expected Lu Yi to be so capable. Not only did he seize the 3rd spirit ball, but he also seized the fourth. When they saw the southern and western tribes joining forces to attack, they thought that the east could no longer hold on to their gains. In the end, the southern and western tribes were successfully divided. After that, the western tribes' forces were almost completely wiped out. Yi Chaochuan used the great teleportation talisman to bring the 9 people from the south over. The battle between the southern and eastern tribes' talismans was all under their observation. The situation in the Black Abyss changed unpredictably. Even the knowledgeable Rizhao could not help but gasp in amazement. Until now, it could be clearly seen that the 3 sides were engaged in a chaotic battle. The light spots representing the eastern side were constantly being annihilated, then reappearing, then being annihilated again, then reappearing again. Occasionally, the light spots representing the cultivators of the other 2 sides would dim. Although they were not at the scene, they could imagine the intensity of the battle. The group of people watched with trepidation. Were these little bastards really going all out? Why did it become so tragic? If so, it would be detrimental to the unity of the hominid tribe. In the past Black Abyss martial arts exhibition matches, there seemed to be no such fierce battle. Gradually, the situation became clear, because there was only one light spot representing the southern and western tribes' cultivators left. From the color of the yellow light spot, it should be the southern tribe's late constellation stage. On the east side, relying on Lu Ye's unreasonable hunting as well as his advantage of being able to quickly provide support, he killed the enemy until only Duan Xiuqun was left standing. Until now, his face was still full of resentment, looking at Lu Yi with a complicated expression, and from time to time, words like despicable and shameless would pop out of his mouth. Opposite him, Lu Yi was alone in front, and Hai Tang and the other 8 people behind him, all of them pale. That kind of fierce battle, that kind of rebirth, almost exhausted their strength. It could be said that the people standing behind Lu Yi were as weak as paper. But everyone's expression was very excited, because the situation had reached this point, they really took first place. It was first place that they did not even dare to think about before the martial arts exhibition matches. Chapter 1352. On the battlefield beside the eastern camp, Duan Xiuqun looked up at the sky with a helpless expression. The situation was hopeless. How did things slowly develop to this point? Before the martial arts demonstration, the southern and western tribes only regarded each other as opponents. No one took the eastern tribe seriously, especially after confirming the weak lineup of the eastern tribe. The cultivators of the 2 tribes all felt that the eastern tribe was just here to join in the fun. However, it was this seemingly weak and vulnerable eastern army that actually made the southern and western tribes unable to contend against them even if they joined hands. They killed them to the point that they had no temper. In the end, they had underestimated the enemy too much. If the 2 tribes had joined forces to suppress the eastern tribe from the start, the eastern tribe wouldn't have achieved such a result. Of course, the enemy was too cunning. At the start, they didn't reveal their strength, but when they reached the middle of the drill, they used all kinds of methods, overwhelming them. Right now, he was the only one left on this side. Although 8 of the 9 people from the eastern side looked like arrows at the end of their flight, they still had a great advantage in terms of geographical advantage. In addition, there was also Lu Yi, who seemed to be stronger than him. Duan Xiuqun knew that he was powerless to reverse the situation. But he was still somewhat unwilling. Lu Yi stepped forward and gestured with his saber. Come. Duan Xiuqun looked down and met Lu Ye's eyes. He understood what he meant. He wanted to fight with him one last time. He focused his mind, and his expression became solemn. His spirit power boiled, and his fighting spirit soared to the heavens. Kill! A cold word came out of his mouth. Even though he was alone, he was like an army. His figure turned into a stream of light and rushed toward Lu Yi. At the same time, Lu Yi also raised his saber. The 8 people behind him didn't move and just watched quietly. The 2 figures quickly approached each other. The spirit light emitted from their bodies became incomparably bright in the blink of an eye, and they collided. In that split second of stagnation, their spiritual energies collided with each other, and a meteorite that passed by was directly turned into powder. Hai Tang and the others focused their eyesight and observed with rapt attention. Through the dense spiritual light, they clearly saw that Duan Xiuqin's fist had blocked Lu Ye's slash. The full power of a late-stage constellation cultivator not only caused the fist to contain violent killing power, but also a solid spirit power defense. The Pan Shan saber couldn't cut through it. The two of them were in a stalemate. Both of them fiercely urged their spiritual energy, leaned forward, and stared into each other's eyes. They were almost face to face as they prepared for the final battle. After 3 breaths, the stalemate was broken. Hai Tang and the others clearly saw that Lu Ye's long saber pressed forward slightly. Duan Xiuqin's figure didn't retreat, but the condensed spiritual power protection on his fist that blocked the long saber was broken. This undoubtedly meant that in such a head-on confrontation, Duan Xiuqin was already at a disadvantage. This wasn't because Lu Yi had a weapon and Duan Xiuqin didn't. Not to mention that Duan Xiuqin was at the late constellation realm. Even if he was only at the true lake realm or divine sea realm, the fighting style he chose was what he was best at. He didn't have a weapon, but his fists were the most suitable weapon for him. If he was forced to use a weapon to fight, it might even affect his strength. Duan Xiuqin's expression was calm. Even if he was at a disadvantage, his expression didn't change at all. The long saber continued to press down, completely breaking through the spiritual power protection and cutting into Duan Xiuqin's fist. Blood splattered. Without the obstruction of the opponent's spiritual power, the saber pressed down at an even faster speed. When a stunning saber light flashed, half of Duan Xiuqin's arm and half of his body were cut open. It was also at this moment that Duan Xiuqin's other fist punched out and imprinted itself on Lu Ye's face. It was light and powerless, like a light breeze, and Lu Ye's figure didn't even sway. After pouring all his strength into that fierce punch, he didn't have any more energy left. Before his figure disappeared, Duan Xiuqin, who had been calm all this time, grinned at Lu Yi, as if he didn't lose anything by punching Lu Yi in the end. Behind Lu Yi, Hai Tang and the others watched quietly. They didn't cheer, nor did they jump for joy. Each of them had a complicated expression. The fact that Lu Yi had led the Eastern region to victory in this martial arts exhibition and obtained first place was something to be happy about. However, as a human, Lu Yi had used his early-stage constellation cultivation to fight head-on against a late-stage constellation cultivator of a lesser human race. This was something to be happy about. Of course, this kind of fight couldn't really reflect a cultivator's true strength. Everyone could see that in this final collision, both Lu Yi and Duan Xiuqin had given up on protecting themselves, and all of their power had been converted into a violent blow. Therefore, one of them would definitely die on the spot. A real battle wouldn't be so straightforward. Both sides would definitely use all kinds of fancy methods to slowly gain the upper hand and turn it into victory or even killing intent. However, this couldn't erase the fact that a late constellation human had lost to an early constellation human in a head-on fight. This made the people of the East feel a little uncomfortable. Was the human race too weak, or was Lu Yi too strong? If it was the latter, it didn't matter. Since the ancient human race had been full of heroes, there would always be new stars of an era that shone so brightly that other races couldn't look directly at them. However, if it was the former, then all of them would have to reflect on themselves. In the strange fog space, when the red light representing Duan Xiuqin was destroyed, the 3 Rizhao and even the east side slightly. This wasn't what they wanted to see. If Hai Tang and the others could think of something, how could they not? After a moment of silence, Rizhao, who was the oldest in the western region, spoke up. It seems that it's necessary to let the brats go out more often and train themselves. Let's find an opportunity to sit down and discuss it together. Let's come up with a plan. In fact, this wasn't the first time the Rizhao had noticed the problem with the human race. However, the human race's situation was a little special. Because they drifted along with Mount Fengsuan, they couldn't go too far away from their headquarters. This caused them to lack experience. Unlike the cultivators of other realms, they couldn't travel too far. Their own realms were right there, and they could go back to visit if they missed home. However, even if they realized it, it was difficult to change it. The Rizhao couldn't make up their minds to do it. This martial arts exercise exposed many problems, especially the last battle between Lu Yi and Duan Xiuqin. It made the Rizhao realize that if they continued to muddle through like this, it would be difficult for the human race to gain a foothold in the vast universe in the future. A late-stage Xingqiu was killed by an early-stage Xingqiu. It was too embarrassing. Okay. Zhu Lauer of the South nodded in agreement. The East naturally had no objections. That's all. The figure of Rizhao from the West flashed and disappeared. The other Rizhao from the South and West did not have the intention to stay any longer and left one after another. Chen Xianhai and the others were the last to leave. When they reappeared beside the Black Abyss, Chen Xianhai and Wu Qima looked at each other and suddenly bowed to Su Yuqing. Su Yuqing was confused. What are you two doing? Chen Xianhai said, in any case, we have to thank fellow Taoist Su for bringing in strong reinforcements for our division. That's why we won first place in the martial arts exercise. Well, our division will never forget fellow Taoists' contribution. Wu Qima also nodded vigorously. Yes. It's all thanks to fellow Taoist Su that our division won first place this time. Brother Chen and I will remember it in our hearts. You'd better forget it. Su Yuqing glared at them angrily and shook her head, too lazy to say anything more to them. The fog in the Black Abyss rolled, and figures rushed out from it. They were the 9 people from the East who participated in the martial arts exercise. Haitang took the lead, followed by Lu Yi and the others. Seeing that Chen Xianhai and the other 2 were still waiting, Haitang hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. Disciples are fortunate to have accomplished the task. A faint smile appeared on Chen Xuanhai's face. You've all done well beyond our expectations. As he spoke, he glanced at Lu Yi, his eyes full of praise. Having watched the entire martial arts exercise, he naturally knew who the biggest contributor was this time, but there was no need to say anything at this time. Originally, from his point of view, Lu Yi was just a junior, but because of Su Yuqing, he couldn't really treat him as a junior at this time. However, he had to admit that Su Yuqing's judgment of people was very accurate, and he couldn't help but sigh at his own inferiority. You all have worked hard in this martial arts exercise. Go back and rest. Although you won first place this time, you can't be arrogant and complacent. Everyone agreed, not daring to be arrogant and complacent. This time, if it weren't for Lu Ye's various schemes, not to mention first place, they wouldn't have even gotten second place. It could be said that 90% of the merit of first place was Lu Ye's, and the remaining 10% was the hard work of the others. Everyone dispersed, and Su Yuqing led Lu Yi and Haitang to the Immortal Spirit Peak in silence. When they arrived above the valley, Su Yuqing released her spiritual power, and Lu Yi fell straight down. Nian Yuxian, who had been waiting here, sensed the commotion and came out to investigate. Seeing Lu Yi, she couldn't help but look him up and down. After confirming that he wasn't missing an arm or a leg, she asked, "How are you?" "Not bad," Lu Yi casually said. "Then when can we leave?" Lu Yi was startled. "I forgot to ask." The main reason was that on the way back, Su Yuqing's expression wasn't quite right. It was cold, so he couldn't rashly ask. Nian Yuxian couldn't help but glare at him. "Could it be that you got a Dao companion here and forgot to go back? If that's the case, you stay here and I'll leave alone." "Senior sister, what are you saying? Haitang and I being Dao companions is just a pretense to deceive outsiders. Otherwise, there's no way to explain how I could enter Black Abyss." Nian Yuxian snorted. "Who knows? Besides, Haitang also said before that you can only enter Black Abyss if you have the aura of the lesser human clan. If you and Haitang being Dao companions is just a pretense, then how did you enter Black Abyss?" This question hit Lu Ye's sore spot, and he said without any change in expression, "Senior Su has a secret technique that allows me to enter Black Abyss in an opportunistic manner. I don't know the specifics, junior brother, I'm just following orders." Nian Yuxian was skeptical. Lu Yi was afraid that she would ask something he couldn't answer, so he said, "I'll recover first. If he doesn't take the initiative to speak in 2 days, I'll ask senior sister Haitang to help me ask." Chapter 1353. Several days later, Lu Yi held a note and checked for Haitang's reply. Ever since he returned from the drill, he had been waiting for Su Yuqing to fulfill her promise. Who knew that she had no intention of looking for him, nor did she ask Haitang to send him a message. Helpless, he could only take the initiative to ask. Without Su Yuqing's note imprint, he sent a message to Haitang. However, he received a rather speechless answer. Su Yuqing was not in the headquarters now. This was because for generations after the drill, the three divisions would begin to divide up the resources of Mount Fengsun. This was something that should be done. Although Mount Fengsun was divided into three parts, because of some mysterious connection, not only could they communicate with each other, but they could also control their own resources. It was rare for the East to win first place, so they naturally had to reap the fruits of their labor. This was also decided by the results of the drill. In the next 50 years, the East would get 40% of the resources, the South 30%, and the West a pitiful 20%. 50 years was not enough to decide the future development of a domain, but it was still a good start. If the East could win second place or even first place in the drill, their future days would only get better and better. Lu Yi suddenly understood. No wonder he had felt some subtle changes in the domain recently. It seemed that the increase in the resources of the domain had brought about. He then asked how long it would take to divide up the resources, and Haitang's reply was basically within a month. There was no other way but to continue waiting. Lu Yi did not think that Su Yuqing was doing this on purpose. Because according to the previous agreement, he needed Su Yuqing to help send him and Thought Moon Immortal to the location of the main domain where Thought Moon Immortal had fallen. This was to prevent their senior sister from being unable to find her way back after leaving Mount Fengsun. Calculating the time, it had been almost 8 months since Thought Moon Immortal had fallen into Mount Fengsun. After such a long time, the headquarters of Mount Fengsun must have traveled an unknown distance. Even if the two of them really left this domain at this time, they would definitely know nothing about the starry sky outside. Since they needed her help to send them off, she would definitely have to deal with the urgent matters at hand first. Dividing up the resources of Mount Fengsun was a responsibility that the headquarters could not shirk. Just as he was about to end the transmission with Haitang, Lu Yi suddenly thought of something. Senior Sister Haitang, does the dwarf race's spirit talismans involve spirit patterns? In the Black Abyss, he had seen too many dwarfs use talismans. The one that left the deepest impression on him was undoubtedly the Golden Body Talisman. Basically, there were people who used it in every battle. Its defensive power was extremely good. The refining of talismans in the 9 regions required the use of spirit veins. Although Lu Yi had never refined talismans before, she more or less had some understanding of this kind of common sense. The basic principle was to build the spiritual tattoos in the spiritual talisman and then use a special method to seal it. When it was needed, it could be activated and the seal could be removed. In this way, the power of the spiritual tattoos would be activated and turned into the power of the spiritual talisman. The talismans of the dwarf race should be similar. That's right. Haitang replied. She probably misunderstood what he meant. Junior brother, do you want to learn how to refine talismans? I can teach you. Lu Tu was stunned. That's not good, is it? In the end, this is the method of your little race. If your master were to find out. Before master left, she told me that junior brother is the biggest contributor to this martial arts exhibition. She can satisfy any request you have. Moreover, no matter what, we are still Dao companions in name. You are considered to be half of the dwarf race. It's okay to learn these things. However, because junior brother doesn't have the bloodline of the dwarf race, the power of the 4 spirit talismans refined will probably be weaker. After hearing the first half of the sentence, Lu Yi was really interested in the art of refining talismans. He needed to wait for Su Yuqing to return. He couldn't just wait. There was no harm in learning more. However, after hearing the second half of her words, Lu Yi dismissed the idea. The reason why the talismans of the dwarf race were stronger than those refined by other races was mainly because of their bloodline. They had unique methods that others could not imitate. Since that was the case, if he wanted to learn the art of refining talismans, he didn't have to learn it from the dwarf race. Can you compile a list of the spirit veins that you need to use to refine the spiritual talismans? I want to study it. Regarding the spiritual talismans, he was more interested in the spirit veins used by the dwarf race. If he could deduce and comprehend them, he would gain a lot. No problem. Hai Chang agreed readily. After a while, Hai Tang came to the valley and handed a thick ancient book to Lu Yi. This is all the spirit veins that the dwarf race needs to refine the spiritual talismans. Junior brother, you can study it yourself. Lu Yi took it. It was heavy in his hand. He could tell that this thick ancient book was not made of simple paper, nor was it made of animal skin. It seemed to be a special kind of jade that had been cut into thin pages. Moreover, it was obviously something that had been around for a long time. This thing is very valuable, right? Lu Yi asked. Hai Tang smiled. Yes, it is the legacy of my immortal spirit peak. Lu Yi understood. I will take good care of it. Hai Tang did not stay for long. She had gained a lot from the battle. If not for Lu Yi looking for her, she would still be cultivating in seclusion. After Hai Tang left, Lu Yi opened the thick ancient book in front of him and read it quietly. The reason why he was interested in the spirit veins of the dwarf race was naturally because he had personally tested the power of the golden body talisman. With the help of the second transformation of the talent tree, he had deduced the divine blade spirit veins on the basis of sharpness. Basically, it could satisfy his needs in battles at the intermediate stage. However, he could not guarantee what would happen when his cultivation reached a higher level in the future. Therefore, he needed to gather all kinds of spirit veins to improve his own information storage of spirit veins. If there came a day when the divine blade could not satisfy his battle needs, he could deduce and improve it at any time. Moreover, his offense was like a divine blade, but in terms of defense, he was still lacking. The defensive spiritual tattoo was no longer of great use. Lu Yi had always wanted to find an opportunity to deduce a new defensive spiritual tattoo. In this way, his situation would become safer in fierce and dangerous battles. Only by having both offense and defense could one be able to advance and retreat at will. In the 9 provinces, he had gained a lot in the holy land of the spirit veins masters. It was also that and all kinds of accumulations that led to the creation of the divine blade. Since then, Lu Yi realized that for a spiritual tattooist, a large amount of information storage was the foundation for continuous improvement of his attainments. Now that there was such an opportunity, he certainly would not miss it. Perhaps in the future, he would have the opportunity to obtain information about spirit veins of other races. The things of the dwarfs were enough for him to digest for a while. Lu Yi plunged into the thick ancient book and absorbed the mystery in it, completely forgetting the passage of time in the immortal spirit peak. This inheritance was very old. It not only recorded all kinds of spirit veins, but also many methods of refining based on those spirit veins. It could be said that in the process of studying this object, Lu Yi not only understood the information of spirit veins, but also understood how the dwarfs refine talismans. Of course, this understanding was only superficial. It was far from the actual refining process. Just like an alchemist, even if one could obtain 10,000 pills, it didn't mean that they could refine the corresponding spirit pill. Refining a spirit pill required thousands of attempts and constant practice. Even the slightest mistake during this period could lead to the failure of a furnace full of spirit pills. Refining talismans was similar to refining elixirs. There was no room for any mistakes. It could even be said that the requirements for refining talismans were stricter than those for refining elixirs. During this period, Missing Moon Immortal came to find Lu Yi once. From Lu Yi, she learned of Su Yuqing's recent situation. Knowing that urging was useless, she could only wait quietly. Fortunately, to her, she had the spirit jade that Lu Yi had given her before, so it did not delay her cultivation. A month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Lu too was comprehending the spirit veins in the thick ancient book that he had never seen before. Suddenly, a sound came from the message talisman. After checking it, he confirmed that it was a message from Hai Tang. Su Yuqing had returned. The time was about the same as Hai Tang's deduction. Lu Yi was overjoyed and hurriedly asked her to pass the message. He said that he wanted to see Su Yuqing and ask if it was possible. Hai Tang naturally did not refuse. In just a moment, a powerful aura suddenly descended. Lu Yi hurriedly walked out and saw Su Yuqing, who was dressed in snow-white clothes and had an icy expression on her face. He didn't know if it was an illusion, But Lu Yi felt that the impression Su Yuqing gave him recently was completely different from before. When he had first seen this woman, she had given him the impression that she was dignified and elegant. Now, all that was left was coldness. Lu Yi guessed that it was related to the previous incident. He stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Greetings, Peak Master." Su Yuqing did not even look at him and said indifferently, "Haishang said that you are in a hurry to leave?" "It's not that urgent." Previously he was in a hurry to leave. Now that he had obtained the inheritance of the immortal spirit peak, he was studying and comprehending it. He could still stay for a while. If he left now, he would not be able to continue comprehending it. Su Yuqing acted as if she did not hear him. Her words were as cold as ice. "Since you are in a hurry to leave, I will follow our previous agreement and send you off." She was chasing him away. Bing or QQ browser searched for the 3 excellencies plus the title of the book every day. Lu Yi understood that in front of a month he did not have the qualifications to bargain. He immediately nodded. "Please wait for a moment, Peak Master. I will call senior sister out." He turned and went to the place where Nian Yuxian was cultivating in seclusion and called her out. Knowing that they were leaving immediately, Nian Yuxian heaved a sigh of relief. Although it was not bad to stay here, this was still the domain of the human race. It was impossible to stay here forever. Su Yuqing waved her hand and threw out an item. It expanded with the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a spirit boat that was almost 10 feet tall. Its appearance was not much different from the spirit state Lu Yi saw in the 9 states. However, Lu Yi knew that it was definitely different from the spirit state Lu Yi saw in the 9 states. The quality must be much higher. Su Yuqing wanted to use this thing to take them through the starry sky. Su Yuqing's body swayed and landed on the upper deck of the spirit boat. She went into the cabin. Seeing this, Lu Yi hurriedly asked Nian Yuxian to get on the boat. They landed on the first deck. The spirit boat shook slightly and turned into a stream of light, flying out of the realm. Lu Yi took out a sound talisman and sent a message to Haitang to bid her farewell. A moment later, he received Haitang's reply. He looked down and saw a familiar figure waving at them from the top of the immortal spirit peak. Chapter 1354. When Lu Yi had entered Mount Fangsun with Haitang, he had clearly felt that he had bumped into a layer of invisible barrier. However, now that he was in the spirit boat, he didn't feel anything special when he left Mount Fangsun. In the blink of an eye, they had left Mount Fangsun's domain and entered the depths of the starry sky. When he looked back, he saw that the inconspicuous mountain was drifting in the opposite direction, gradually getting farther and farther away. On the deck, Thought Moon Immortal asked softly, "This should be a star boat, right?" Lu Yi nodded. "It must be." The two of them had stayed in the Rest Abyss Pavilion on Mount Fangsun for a long time, reading all the books on the 4th floor and below. Now, they were not completely ignorant of all kinds of general knowledge about the starry sky. Naturally, they knew that the flying treasures cultivators used to travel in the starry sky were called star boats. Of course, there were also other types of flying treasures, and star boats were the most common type. Strictly speaking, star boats were spirit boats. However, the biggest difference between them was not just that they were of a higher quality. Not only was it of a higher quality, but there was also a sharp horn at the front of the spirit boat that was specially refined. This thing was used to knock away some small obstacles, such as the meteorites that could be seen everywhere in the starry sky. Since there was basically no resistance when flying in the starry sky, theoretically speaking, one could fly faster and faster. Lu Yi had learned this when he had first stepped into the starry sky from the 9 prefectures. However, this was only a theory after all. In fact, cultivators would control their flying speed within a reasonable range, which was the limit of their perception and reaction, to ensure that they wouldn't suddenly bump into anything. In this way, the stronger the divine sense, the faster the speed of the cultivator, the faster they could control their flying speed. With the help of a star boat, the speed would be much faster than the cultivator's reaction speed. Therefore, it was necessary to install a ram at the front of the star boat. In this way, some small obstacles could be knocked away without any hindrance. If they ran into some large obstacles that they couldn't knock down, the star boat would set up a defensive formation. It could detect further locations and it would warn the cultivator of the starboat. It would make it easier for the cultivator driving the starboat to take evasive action and ensure the safety of himself and the starboat. Therefore, the biggest difference between ordinary spirit boats and starboats was that they didn't have a ram. If they had a ram, most of them were starboats that were used to travel in the starry sky. Of course, the materials used were also different. Most of the materials in the domain could not be used in the starry sky because of the corrosive nature of the omnipresent starry sky energy. Materials of insufficient quality could easily be damaged. With the current foundation of the 9 prefectures, Lu Yi estimated that even if he gathered all the treasures in the entire realm, he might not be able to craft a qualified planetary ship. However, as the foundation of the 9 prefectures continued to increase, the quality of the precious treasures that could be produced would improve, and this situation would slowly improve. All in all, starboats were extremely expensive flying treasures, and they were indispensable aids for cultivators to travel through the starry sky. Although Lu Yi and her senior brother had learned about the existence of planetary ships from various sources in the Rest Abyss Pavilion, this was the first time they had seen one. Moreover, judging from the size of Su Yuqing's planetary ship, it was obviously not an ordinary thing. Naturally, they found it somewhat novel. Standing on the deck, Nye Tian sensed the starboat's speed and found that it was indeed ridiculously fast. It wasn't just the 2 of them flying alone. It was possible for a third person to fly alone. Occasionally, they would bump into some drifting meteorites, but they would all be smashed into pieces. However, the starboat itself did not shake at all. Louis even saw a meteorite the size of 2 houses being smashed into 2 halves. He was secretly speechless. If he didn't control his speed and bumped into such a meteorite, he wouldn't have a good ending. From this, it could be seen that the starboat's toughness was far superior to his physique. After all, it was a Sunshine Realm item. It was indeed extraordinary. The novelty lasted for a while, but it soon lost its novelty. The main reason was that this thing didn't belong to him. He just wanted to watch the fun. He wouldn't really act like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. The 2 of them returned to their cabins and found one each. Nian Yuxian meditated and cultivated, while Lu Yi cultivated and continued to take out the thick ancient book to study. Time flew by. About half a month later, the starboat that had been flying steadily suddenly shook. After shaking for a while, Lu Yi, who was immersed in studying, slowly came back to his senses. He flashed out of the room and came to the deck. Nian Yuxian also came out. The 2 of them looked at each other and looked around. They both discovered this starry sky. When they looked around again, they saw the familiar sun star and Venus. We're here already? Nian Yuxian was shocked. This was obviously the place where she had fallen into the Fangsuan Mountain. It had been more than 8 months since she had fallen into the Fangsuan Mountain, and the Fangsuan Mountain had always been moving. Even if its speed wasn't very fast, who knew how far it had flown in such a long time? However, Su Yuqing had actually sent the 2 of them back in just half a month. This was definitely not her maximum speed. From this location to the 9 provinces with their current speed, it would take them less than half a year to return. Su Yuqing didn't show up. She probably felt that there was no need to show up. This time, she was just fulfilling the agreement with Lu Yi. Nian Yuxian said, "We should thank Senior Su and bid farewell." Lu Yi nodded. Of course, the 2 of them were about to fly to the 2nd floor. However, in the next instant, Nian Yuxian suddenly stopped. Lu Yi turned to look at her in confusion. Nian Yuxian said, "Senior Su asked you to go by yourself." Lu Yi didn't care. "I'll be right back." She flashed to the 2nd floor and stood in front of the cabin. Just as she was about to raise her hand to knock on the door opened by itself. Lu Yi straightened her face and stepped in. The door behind her closed. She looked up and saw a woman sitting cross-legged on a soft couch with an indifferent expression. Her figure was the size of an ordinary person, not the small and delicate appearance of the dwarfs. Lu Yi knew that this was a kind of secret technique of the dwarfs. They could turn into the size of an ordinary person, but it would consume spiritual power. Under normal circumstances, the dwarfs would act like this when they were outside. Because in this way, they would look no different from the human race. which was more convenient for them to hide their identity. This was the first time the two of them were alone since that day. However, facing the sun, Lu Yi didn't dare to violate the rules. She obediently stepped forward. "Peak Master." Su Yuqing did not even lift her eyelids as she spoke in a clear voice. Her voice was cold as water, and her tone didn't fluctuate in the slightest. "You won first place in the martial arts competition. Everyone else will be rewarded. I have discussed with your two martial uncles. Although you are not a member of the dwarfs, you are the greatest contributor to this martial arts competition, so you can't be treated differently because of your identity. The things inside can be considered rewards for the time being. You can also see them as a gift from the Eastern sect." As she said this, she flicked her finger and a storage ring flew to Lu Yi. Lu Yi reached out to take it but didn't rush to check it. Just as she was about to thank her, Su Yuqing flicked another storage ring. "This is for you too." Although Lu Yi didn't understand why there were two rewards, she still took them both. Su Yuqing didn't say anything else. Lu Yi waited for a moment, and after confirming that she had no other orders, she said, "Thank you for escorting me all the way. Senior sister and I have arrived." Su Yuqing lowered her eyes and didn't respond. Seeing this, Lu Yi cupped her fists and turned to leave. "You didn't forget anything?" Su Yuqing's voice suddenly sounded. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, but quickly reacted and took out the heavy ancient book. "I forgot about this." Although there wasn't enough time and he hadn't fully understood it, Lu Yi had already flipped through it, so it wouldn't matter much if he returned it. After all, this was an inheritance of the immortal spiritual peak. It might not have much practical value to the immortal spiritual peak, but it definitely had an important symbolic meaning. Su Yuqing wanted to take it back, so it was natural. She didn't reach out to take it, so Lu Yi could only place it in front of her. "Take care, Peak Master." After Lu Yi finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. Just as he reached the door, a gust of wind brushed past his ear and hit the door with a loud bang. The jade pages flipped open, and the heavy ancient book fell next to Lu Ye's feet. "If you like it, take it with you." Scram. A cold voice came from behind. Lu Yi looked down at the ancient book at his feet, bent down to pick it up and carefully put it away. He turned around and strode towards Su Yuqing, as if he was about to face a strong enemy. His aura suddenly became aggressive. Su Yuqing, who had been lowering her eyes, finally raised her head and looked at Lu Yi in amazement. Her expression also became a little flustered. "What are you doing?" "Don't talk." On the deck, Nian Yu Immortal looked at the deep starry sky and frowned. Lu Yi had been summoned by Su Yuqing for a full day, but he still hadn't come out. She didn't know what was going on inside. She wanted to break in several times, but thinking that the gap in strength between them was too big, she restrained herself. Perhaps Senior Su was instructing Lu Yi about something important? After another 2 days, Nian Yu Immortal couldn't stand it anymore. Just as she made up her mind to find out, the door on the second floor suddenly opened, and then Lu Ye's figure rushed out and greeted her. "Senior sister, let's go home." Nian Yu Immortal inexplicably felt that Lu Ye's tone was very cheerful, and she didn't know what good thing he had encountered. She bowed slightly to the second floor, and then caught up with Lu Ye's figure. In the starry sky, Lu Yi and Nian Yu Immortal walked side by side, flying in the direction of 9 regions. Lu Yi looked solemn and his eyes were deep. Nian Yu Immortal turned her head to look at him from time to time. At first, Lu Yi didn't care, but gradually, he noticed that Nian Yu Immortal's expression became very subtle and strange. He couldn't help but ask, "Senior sister, is there a flower on my face?" Nian Yu Immortal sneered, "There is no flower on your face, but there is on your neck." Lu Yi was taken aback. He hurriedly rummaged through his storage space for a while, and finally found a mirror-like treasure. He opened it and looked at himself. At a glance, he saw a conspicuous mark on his neck. What the hell is this? Even though Lu Yi was experienced, at this moment, he couldn't help but blush. Chapter 1355. She was doing this on purpose. He was in the early constellation realm, and his flesh and blood were abundant. Even if his flesh was damaged, he would be able to recover quickly. There was no reason for such a mark to be maintained. Yet, this was the truth. This was clearly a trick left behind by Su Yuqing. With her cultivation base, she definitely had the ability to do this without Lu Yi noticing. The key was that Lu Yi could not get rid of this mark. He did not know how long it would last. If Su Yuqing did not do this on purpose, Lu Yi would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. It was no wonder that the Thought Moon Immortal would look at him with such a subtle gaze. A man and a woman had been together for 3 days. Now that he had such a mark on his neck, as long as one was not blind, one would know what had happened during those 3 days. But what? Why would Su Yuqing do this? Lu Yi could not figure it out. While he was trying his best to use all kinds of methods to remove this mark, Thought Moon Immortal was mocking and ridiculing him from time to time. I really couldn't tell that the pristine senior Su would have such an interest. What's that saying in the mortal world? Oh, that's right. An old cow eats young grass. If you want to eat it, don't wait until you're old. Junior apprentice brother, what do you think? What's there to be embarrassed about? It's normal for a man and a woman to love each other. It's only been 3 days and the two of you are too much. If I'd known earlier, I would have left first so as not to disturb your mood. When did it start? Why didn't I notice it at all? Does Haitang know? You're her Taoist companion in name. She probably doesn't know about it. If she knew that her master and her Taoist companion in name. This was the first time Lu Yi noticed that the Thought Moon Immortal was so talkative. He bowed to her with a long face. My good senior apprentice sister, please spare me. This is just an accident. For some reason, he felt like a child who had been caught red-handed doing something bad. The Thought Moon Immortal snorted coldly. Whether it's an accident or not, if you have the chance to meet Senior Su again in the future, you'd better be careful. Lu Yi was puzzled. What do you mean? Nian Yu Immortal said, wild beasts have some instinctive behavior of swearing territory. Some women have it as well. She clearly knew that you would be traveling with me, yet she still left such a mark. Isn't that swearing territory? If you have any affairs in the future, don't let her know. Otherwise, she might beat you up. Lu Yi said guiltily, I don't have any red flowers or willow trees. Nian Yu Xian curled her lips. You know best in your heart whether you have them or not. Urging her spiritual power, she left Lu Yi behind her. Lu Yi had no choice but to follow. Originally, Thought Moon Immortal was very curious as to what methods Su Yuqing used to send Lu Yi into the Black Abyss to participate in the little human tribe's martial arts practice. She planned to ask about it on the way back, but now there was no need to ask. The matter was obvious. With such a secret relationship between them, how could Lu Yi not enter the Black Abyss? The road ahead was long. Thought Moon Immortal no longer ridiculed Lu Yi. She also knew that in such a relationship, Lu Yi would not be the one to take the initiative. The difference in cultivation between them was too great. Only when the one with a higher cultivation took the initiative would there be a possibility of success. If Lu Yi really took the initiative, he would have died countless times. Lu Yi also no longer struggled with the mark on his neck. This thing could not be removed with his ability. Fortunately, he found that this thing could not be maintained for too long, so he simply let it fade away on its own. He took out the 2 storage rings that Su Yuqing had given him and examined them. One of the rings contained almost 100 talismans. This was more or less what Lu Yi had expected. Talisman crafting was the specialty of the little human tribe. If he had to take out something as a thank you gift, talismans would be the best choice. This thing was also something that all the major races in the starry sky vied for, but because the little human tribe rarely came into contact with the outside world, talismans of the little human tribe were very rare and extremely expensive. Over 100 talismans were undoubtedly very valuable. After all, these talismans were used as a reward, so the little human tribe could not be too stingy. The hundreds of talismans were divided into several types, generally similar to the types of spirit tattoos. They were divided into attack, defense, and support categories, and there were also various subcategories. Each type of talisman was accompanied by a jade slip, which introduced the type and power of the talisman in detail. This was very considerate. In this way, even if Lu Yi did not know much about talismans, he only needed to look at the contents of the jade slip to know when and how to activate these talismans. In particular, Two of the red jade talismans caught Lu Ye's attention. The talismans of the little human tribe were also divided into different grades. It could be seen from the color. Generally, the jade talismans were white, the lowest grade, and could basically meet the needs of the cultivators of the starry sky constellation. One level above was the purple jade talisman, which was refined by the cultivators of the moon jade realm. In theory, when activated, it could unleash the power of the cultivators of the moon jade realm. Of course, this was only in theory. Limited by the cultivation of the one activating it, and the time it took to nurture it, the actual effect would be somewhat different. In the Black Abyss martial arts exhibition, there were some little human tribe cultivators who used the purple jade talisman. The power was not bad, but it was still very different from when the cultivators of the moon jade realm used it. This was because the cultivators of the little human tribe were not strong enough. Further up were the red jade talismans that only the sunshine cultivators could refine. Like the purple jade talismans, in theory, it could unleash the power of the sunshine cultivators, but the actual effect depended on the situation. Among the hundreds of talismans, there were 2 red jade talismans, 10 purple jade talismans, and the rest were all white. For other cultivators, even the white jade talismans were extremely precious, but for someone like Lu Yi who was proficient in spirit tattoos, the value of the white jade talismans was not that great. Fundamentally speaking, after the talismans were activated, the power of spirit tattoos was also displayed. Lu Yi could construct spirit tattoos himself, so of course he did not need to activate the talismans. These white jade talismans could be taken back and left in the 9 States Guard Palace for others to use. For Lu Yi, only the purple and red jade talismans were useful. This was especially true for the 2 red jade talismans. Lu Yi could sense that one of them had Su Yuqing's aura. In other words, these were definitely jade talismans refined by Su Yuqing. No wonder there were 2 of them. The reward for coming to Mount Fengsuan should only be a red jade talisman, but Su Yuqing decided to add another one to it. It wasn't that she was stingy, but that this thing was extremely difficult to refine even for her. Moreover, if a red jade talisman couldn't help Lu Yi in a crisis, then there was no point in giving her more. This was something that Su Yuqing had prepared when she left Mount Fengsuan with Lu Yi and the Thought Moon Immortal. From this, it could be seen that her heart was not as cold as it seemed. Lu Yi was not in a hurry to deal with these talismans. He took out the second storage ring and inspected it. When he saw it, Lu Yi paused in his tracks. The Thought Moon Immortal sensed something and hastily stopped as well. She turned around and looked at him. "What's wrong?" "There's something good." Lu Yi smiled cheerfully. He took out the item from the storage ring and spread it on his palm. Shockingly, it was a star boat. However, it was much more shabby compared to Su Yuqing's 2-story planetary boat. This planetary boat looked like the fairies that could be seen everywhere in the mortal world. It did not have 2 stories, but only one. The front and back decks were exposed, and there was a canopy in the middle. Clearly, such a star boat wouldn't be able to accommodate too many cultivators. However, no matter how shabby a planetary boat it was still a planetary boat. Even though it looked shabby on the surface, it did not mean that it was cheap. This was something that could not be refined in the current 9 provinces. When Lu Yi boarded Su Yuqing's planetary boat, he was still thinking about when he would be able to own one. This would save him the trouble of traveling through the stars in the future. He did not expect this wish to come true so soon. He had saved himself a few decades of hard work. The Thought Moon Immortal clicked her tongue and said, "Junior apprentice brother, you're quite good at living off women." Lu Ye's good mood was instantly ruined. He said with a bitter expression, "Senior apprentice sister, let's not talk about the past." The Thought Moon Immortal rolled her eyes at him and urged, "Hurry up and activate it." Lu Yi immediately channeled his spiritual power into the planetary boat. The planetary boat in his hand suddenly expanded and turned into a fairy that was about 20 feet long. It was much smaller than Su Yuqing's planetary boat, but its overall flow was better. Moreover, the surface of the entire planetary boat was suffused with a layer of silver light. Lu Yi landed on it in a flash and looked around. He looked like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. He touched everything here and there, and could not bear to part with it. The thought moon immortal landed on the other side. She saw two large words at the stern of the boat. Junior apprentice brother, this planetary boat has a name. What's its name? Lu Yi came over in a flash. He lowered his head and saw the two words. Silver fish. This was in line with the characteristics of this planetary boat. If this boat was steered, it should resemble a silver fish swimming in the sea. Lu Yi entered the canopy and found the core of the formation that controlled this planetary boat. He familiarized himself with it and quickly got the hang of it. A moment later, just as Lu Yi had expected, the silver fish turned into a ray of light. It swam in the vast starry sky like a fish and headed toward the 9 provinces. It slowly increased its speed, and soon, it surpassed the flying speed of him and the thought moon immortal. However, Lu Yi soon found a problem. Flying like this consumed a lot of spiritual power, much more than flying by himself. The reason was very simple. Flying by oneself only required one to control oneself. Moreover, after reaching a certain speed, the cultivator only needed to use a small amount of spiritual power to maintain it. However, at this moment he was driving a planetary boat after all. Fortunately, there was a depression in the core of the formation to place spiritual jades. As long as the spiritual jades were placed in it, the consumption of spiritual power could be greatly reduced. This principle was similar to the spiritual boats in the 9 provinces. Anyone could quickly get the hang of it. Another point was that the speed of this planetary boat needed to be increased slowly. It could not be increased to its maximum speed all of a sudden. Therefore, it was not suitable to use it if they were chased by some experts and could not get rid of them. Otherwise, the distance between them would be shortened. Chapter 1356. Originally, it would take about 5 or 6 months for Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal to return to 9 regions. After all, the location where Thought Moon Immortal fell in Fangsuan Mountain was almost at the limit of 9 regions. But now, if they flew back at this speed, it would only take half a month. In contrast, Lu Yi suddenly found that when Su Yuqing sent them back, she didn't use her full strength at all. Otherwise, it would have been faster. With such a star boat, the time to travel in the starry sky in the future would be greatly reduced. Unfortunately, this thing had extremely high requirements for materials and refining skills. With the current level of 9 regions, it was impossible to refine it. Otherwise, with 1 per person, it would be extremely convenient to explore the surrounding starry sky. A message came from the battlefield imprint. Lu Yi didn't need to check to know who was looking for him. He immersed his mind and looked. Sure enough, it was little Jiao. He had disappeared for more than 8 months, so little Jiao was still very worried, especially with Thought Moon Immortal's example. Fortunately, both Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal had returned safely. After chatting with little Jiao for a while, he learned that everything in 9 regions was stable and there were no changes, so he ended the communication. Lu Yi let Thought Moon Immortal drive the star boat again, while he began to nourish the 2 talismans of the dwarf race. There were 2 kinds of nourishment for the talismans of the dwarf race: external nourishment and internal nourishment. External nourishment was similar to nourishing some treasures. It was kept close to the body and slowly nourished with spiritual power. When needed, it could be taken out to fight the enemy. Generally speaking, some not-so-precious talismans that were often used were nourished in this way. Lu Yi chose internal nourishment because the object he wanted to nourish was the 2 red jade talismans. He pulled out the Panshan saber, enhanced it with the divine edge spirit pattern, rolled up his sleeve, and drew a wound on his arm. Then, he immersed the red jade talisman into the wound. After absorbing his blood, the red jade talisman immediately turned into a red light and imprinted into his flesh. There was no strange feeling, but Lu Yi could clearly feel the existence of these 2 jade talismans. This method of nourishment was better than the previous one, and it could more effectively exert the power of the jade talisman. The wound, which was not too big, also showed signs of slowly healing under the wriggling of Lu Ye's flesh. The cultivation of Constellation Realm was mainly to improve the essence of the cultivator's physique. In the early stage, it was to temper the essence of the flesh. At present, Lu Yi had not reached this level yet. Otherwise, his flesh and blood wounds would be healed immediately. But compared to Divine Sea Realm, the recovery speed, the flesh and wounds were healed. In the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, his wounds had completely healed without leaving any traces behind. Lu Yi didn't need to worry about the rest. The 2 red jade talismans would slowly be nourished in his body. When he needed to use them, he could use them at any time. The longer he was nurtured, the higher his cultivation would be, and the more power he would be able to unleash. He replaced Thought Moon Immortal, who was piloting the star boat. Then he took out 2 purple jade talismans and gave them to her. He told her the nourishing method and told her to do the same. The rest of the journey was smoothly. While steering the star boat, Lu Yi took out the thick ancient book and started reading it. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. When a familiar celestial body appeared in front of them, Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal both knew that they were home. Without stopping, the star boat shot into the 9 prefectures like a silver fish. At the same time, in a certain part of the starry sky 100,000 kilometers away, the woman who had transformed into a humanoid was watching from afar. Lu Yi and Nian Yu Immortal didn't notice her. After all, the gap between their cultivation was too big. How could 2 Constellation Realm early-stage cultivators notice her? She didn't have any evil intentions. She just wanted to see what the realm of 9 heavens was like. She wanted to know the specific location of this realm. If it weren't for the fact that there was an expert behind Lu Yi, she would have definitely sneaked into the 9 prefectures and investigated more carefully. However, because Lu Yi had an expert behind her that even she felt inferior to, she could only stop here to avoid being noticed and misunderstood. She saw the realm of 9 heavens. She also saw the realm of 9 heavens. It was not inferior to the realm of 9 heavens in size. She recognized the essence of this realm at a glance. She was amazed. That expert is really powerful. He can take such a realm. It seems that the realm of 9 heavens is devouring the foundation of this realm and turning it into its own capital. Such ability is really extraordinary. The woman looked at it again. Then she turned and left. People who met in the starry sky were like fish passing by in the sea. A short meeting didn't mean a long stay. Perhaps they would never see each other again in this life. Lu Yi and Nian Yu Immortal returned together. Thought Moon Immortal had no place to go in 9 regions. She was originally the pass master of the Zhangyan Mountain Pass of the War Province, and had been guarding the Zhangyan Mountain Pass all year round. Now that the pass had become a decoration, she, who had no family or sect, could only return to Ao Mountain with Lu Yi. She had a good relationship with Shui Yuan. They had known each other since they were young. Compared to the last time they returned to the Blue Blood sect, the sect was undoubtedly much more lively. There were many more figures coming and going. Shui Yuan was still guarding the sect, but Lu Yi saw that she should not be far away from the Constellation Realm. The only awkward thing was that the Blue Blood sect didn't have many strong cultivators, especially those in the Spirit Sea Realm. If Shui Yuan left, there would be no one to guard the sect. He didn't sense the aura of Amber. Presumably, she was still earning merits in the Wushuang continent. Nian Yu Immortal went to accompany Shui Yuan. Before leaving, she threw a meaningful look at Lu Yi, which made him feel a little guilty. He didn't know if she would tell Shui Yuan about his embarrassing matter. Lu Yi didn't plan to stay in Ao Mountain for long. He should worry about what he should do. If he was still in the Spirit Sea Realm, he would naturally focus on the sect. It was understandable that the cultivators of other sects were like this. But now that he was a Constellation Realm, he should not only care about the Blue Blood sect. He should care more about the entire 9 regions. All constellations should be like this. Only in this way could a region continue to prosper and grow stronger. He planned to stay in the sect for 2 or 3 days, then set off to take the initiative to guard the Guardian Hall. He needed to settle down for a while, so he wouldn't leave 9 regions for a while. It was just right for him to guard the 9 regions Guardian Hall and replace others to go out and collect spiritual jades. But he didn't expect that Shui Yuan would take him as a strong man. Although he had returned quietly, he had still been seen by some of the sect's disciples. In the current Blue Blood sect, he was a living legend, and it could be said that whether it was in terms of the degree of worship or fame, he had far surpassed the eldest senior brother of the past. After all, the era that belonged to eldest senior brother was decades ago, and his rise had only happened in recent years. It could be said that in the hearts of the blue blood sect's disciples, he was the eldest senior brother. The news spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire blue blood sect knew that this legend had returned. For a time, outside the green bamboo peak, there were disciples passing by, intentionally or unintentionally, wanting to admire him. Seeing this, Shui Yuan didn't want to extinguish the disciples' enthusiasm. Sometimes, appropriate encouragement could make people work harder in their cultivation. So, she arranged for Lu Yi to have a grand ceremony. As for the grand ceremony, there was no theme. Shui Yuan told Lu Yi to say whatever came to mind. Lu Yi naturally didn't dare to disobey the mission given by his second senior sister. And so, a grand ceremony that would affect the future of the blue blood sect was born. On the day of the ceremony, the green bamboo peak was overcrowded. The blue blood sect's encampment at the Spirit Stream battlefield was empty. All of the Spirit Stream realm cultivators had rushed back, and so had the Cloud River realm cultivators. Even the few true Lake realm cultivators who were earning merit on the Peerless continent had all rushed back. Looking at the prosperous scene before him, Lu Yi was gratified. Thinking back, when he first entered the blue blood sect's encampment at the Spirit Stream battlefield, there was only a group of loose cultivators. He had to find a way to recruit a group of people to maintain the sect's continuity. After so many years, the sect finally had a new atmosphere. Looking at the burning reverence in the eyes below, Lu Yi smiled and put on a harmless appearance. I don't know where to start and I don't know what to say. How about this? If you have any questions, just ask and I'll answer them one by one. The crowd below fell silent for a moment. Suddenly, a Spirit Stream realm disciple shouted, "Senior brother, can you tell us how the Spirit Stream 3 disasters came to be?" Although Lu Yi had left the Spirit Stream battlefield for a long time, there were still many rumors about him, such as the sect destroying Yi, the Spirit Stream 3 disasters, and so on. Lu Yi looked over and memorized the appearance of the disciple who asked the question. However, since he had already spoken, it was naturally inappropriate for him to not answer. Hearing this, the hearts of the people below surged. The grand ceremony lasted for a full 2 days. There were all kinds of questions. Aside from the unreliable ones at the beginning, most of the disciples were concerned about cultivation and combat. Not to mention that Lu Yi was naturally adept at cultivation and combat, he answered them with ease. These young junior brothers and sisters benefited greatly. If Shui Yuan hadn't forcibly ended this grand ceremony in the end, it would have continued. The Spirit Stream realm cultivators returned to the Spirit Stream battlefield, the Cloud River realm cultivators went to the Cloud River battlefield, and the True Lake realm cultivators set off for the Peerless continent to continue hunting the corpse race. Lu Yi came to the Heaven continent, where the reincarnation tree's clone was. In front of the Guardian Hall, Lu Yi and eldest senior brother Feng Wujiang bid farewell. In the beginning, the Guardian Hall was guarded by Jian Guhong. He could be considered the first guardian of the 9 states. However, it was naturally inappropriate for him to handle such matters alone. Hence, not long after Lu Yi left the 9 states, eldest senior brother was promoted to a constellation and took over Jian Guhong's position to continue guarding the Guardian Hall. In any case, eldest senior brother wasn't in a hurry to step into the starry sky. This was because he had already made up his mind to continue staying in the 9 states for a period of time to accompany eldest senior brother's sister-in-law, Chiu Min. At the same time, he was also waiting for Chiu Min to be promoted to a constellation together. Counting the days, this was about more than a year ago. Meanwhile, eldest senior brother's sister-in-law, Chiu Min, had also successfully been promoted to a constellation 3 months ago. She was qualified to live together with eldest senior brother. Chapter 1357. Little junior brother, I'll leave this side to you, Feng Wujiang said. Feng Wujiang said. Beside him, Chiu Min intimately snuggled up to him like a 16-year-old girl. When the two of them stood together, They were truly a handsome man and a beautiful woman. From the outside, it was simply impossible to tell that Xiaomin was pregnant with a daughter. Lu Yi covered his eyes with one hand and waved the other. Let's go, let's go. The two of you make me feel very lonely. Xiaomin covered her mouth and chuckled. If junior brother Yi feels lonely, you can find someone to accompany you. The two of them left. Lu Yi returned to the main hall and did a little check. Now, the most important thing in the Guardian Hall was naturally the star map of the starry sky around the 9 regions. This was the result of the continuous exploration of the 9 regions' constellations. However, the area around the 9 regions still needed to be perfected. He believed that it wouldn't be long before the nearby space around the 9 regions could be fully explored. Other than the star map, there were also the spirit jades that Lu Yi gave to Jian Guhong. When he gave them to Jian Guhong, there were 15,000 pieces of spirit jades. They were left in the Guardian Hall for the Guardian Envoys to use for their cultivation, so as not to delay their cultivation progress. Now, it seemed that not much was used. After all, cultivators who had just entered the constellation did not consume much spirit jades. Lu Yi had tried it before. Ordinary people only needed about 20 spirit jades a month to satisfy their cultivation needs. 15,000 spirit jades could be used for dozens of years. Other than that, as Lu Yi entered the Guardian Hall, there were 2 more secret rooms here. In one of the secret rooms, there were many jade slips and rubbings that he had brought out from the dwarf race's Rest Abyss Pavilion. They recorded all kinds of things that the dwarf race had explored the starry sky over the years. It was of great significance to the current 9 regions. In the other secret room, there were the musical notes that Lu Yi had refined before. The range of the 9 regions' heavenly secrets was limited. Moreover, in the starry sky, cultivators used musical notes to communicate with each other. On this point, the 9 regions naturally had to be connected to the outside world. Therefore, in the future, if anyone in the 9 regions was promoted to constellation, or if there were already 4, Women's City's Law Guardian Hall reported. Firstly, to receive their own musical notes and leave their own imprint on the other musical notes, making it easier to communicate with others. Secondly, to read the information in the jade slips and understand more about the starry sky. This was to avoid being confused after entering the starry sky. The news had already spread, and as time passed, these regulations should slowly be implemented. Lu Yi's days in the Guardian Hall were boring and lonely. Apart from occasionally receiving messages from other constellations and filling up his star chart, Lu Yi had nothing else to do. Every day, other than cultivating, he would be reading the thick and heavy books that he had brought out from the humanoid tribe. What was worth mentioning was that after almost 2 years of exploration, the constellation realm cultivators of the 9 regions had actually coincidentally found the location of the Wushuang continent. Before they found the exact location of the Wushuang continent, the 9 prefectures had no idea. They could only deduce that it was not too far away from the 9 prefectures. Because of Yuxian's arrangement in the past, 9 regions could draw on the foundation of the Wushuang continent, and the 2 worlds could also form a smooth communication between them. Of course not. This was because even if Yuxian was a sunshine, there was no way for him to link the 2 realms together. The person who found the Wushuang continent was Lu Yi's old acquaintance, the 3rd-generation sect master of the Vitality sect, Mengjie. He was one of the first people in 9 regions to be promoted to a constellation. He probably felt that he shouldered the heavy responsibility of exploring the starry sky. While the others were only exploring the 9 regions, he was advancing in a straight line, going further and further away. This was also in line with his personality as a body cultivator. He was straightforward, brave, and fearless. He would always charge at the front and protect his companions behind him. Even when Yuxian arrived in 9 regions, no one could contact him. Until one day, he suddenly discovered a realm that seemed to have some vitality. When he entered it, he coincidentally saw the cultivators of 9 regions. From this, it was confirmed that it was the Wushuang continent. Mengjie himself did not return to 9 regions because the journey back was too far, and there was not enough time. However, since he had entered the Wushuang continent, it was easy to contact 9 regions. He could casually find a few cultivators of 9 regions and get them to pass the message back. If it were not for the fact that the array set up by Uxion did not support the teleportation of Constellation Realm cultivators, he could have used the array to directly teleport back to 9 regions. Therefore, the star map of the Guardian Hall was circular as a whole. It was circular, but it was extremely protruding at a certain location, as if this circle had grown a long horn. The tip of that horn was the location of the Wushuang continent. Lu Yi estimated that according to the speed of a Constellation Realm cultivator, it would take at least a year to fly from 9 regions to the Wushuang continent. This was also in line with the time Meng Jie spent in the exploration process. During the exploration process, he was not always in a flying state. He would also stop midway to search for spirit jades. Meng Jie was able to find the Wushuang continent purely by luck. After all, it was a spherical direction after leaving 9 regions. The distance between the 2 realms was a year. Any slight deviation would cause him to miss it. He did not continue his exploration. Instead, he stayed in the starry sky near the Wushuang continent to search for spirit jades. There were many constellations in 9 regions, and the competition was fierce. On the other hand, he was the only one in the Wushuang continent. He could search however he wanted. A month passed quickly, and Lu Yi finally finished reading the thick ancient book. Many wonderful ideas emerged in his mind, and he could not wait to deduce new spirit inscriptions. There were many spirit inscriptions that needed to be deduced. Basically, many of the spirit inscriptions that he obtained before the Divine Sea realm were not very useful. It could be seen from the sharpness and defense. However, it was not easy to deduce a new spirit inscription. Therefore, he could only prioritize one of them. Lu Yi chose the defense inscription. Sharpness and defense were the first spirit inscriptions that he obtained. They could play a great role in battle. Now that the sharpness had been replaced by the divine edge, there was no replacement for the defense inscription. Naturally, he had to strengthen this aspect first. With the defense inscription as the foundation, with the help of the deduction ability after the second transformation of the talent tree, combined with his own attainments in spirit inscriptions, Lu Yi felt that he should be able to obtain a good spirit inscription as long as he had enough time. During this period, some constellations that had advanced would occasionally report to the Guardian Hall to receive their notes. Then, they would plunge into the secret room where many jade slips were stored to read. They would not come out for many days. In the past, the Guardian Hall was very quiet. Basically, no one would come here. However, since Lu Yi took charge of this place, it gradually became lively. Although it was not as crowded as a marketplace, it was much better than before. Lu Yi condensed his own doppelganger to receive these people. At the same time, he filled in the gaps in the star atlas according to the information from outside. His original body was immersed in deducing new spirit inscriptions. His own spirit jades were also constantly being consumed in this state. In the early stage of the constellation realm, one would only need 20 spirit jades a month. However, Lu Yi was different. In the beginning, he needed about 120 spirit jades a month. Now, as his strength increased, he needed about 150 spirit jades. The increase was not great. After all, he had not made a substantial breakthrough in his cultivation realm. This was still within the effective cultivation efficiency that he controlled. If he did it openly, no matter how many spirit jades he had, it would not be enough to squander. Of course, if this was the case, it would cause a great waste. Half a year passed in a flash. On this day, Lu Yi was studying his new spirit inscription. After such a long time, the new spirit inscription deduced based on the defense inscription had already taken shape. However, the power of the defense inscription had not yet reached Lu Ye's expectations. Therefore, these days, he had been trying to improve the details to see if he could improve this new spirit inscription even more. Suddenly, there was a message from the battlefield imprint. This was a very normal thing. The constellations that were exploring outside would contact him from time to time, passing on the location and situation of some planets that they had discovered so that he could fill in the star atlas. Little Nine would also occasionally chat with him to pass the time. However, what was abnormal was that there was not only one message, but 3 in a row. Soon, more messages came one after another. There were even messages from musical notes. Lu Ye's expression turned serious. He immediately realized that something big must have happened. Otherwise, there was no reason for so many people to contact him in such a short period of time. He quickly immersed his mind to investigate, and his expression collapsed. Something had happened in the Wushuang continent. Just 2 hours ago, the 9 states cultivators who were tempering themselves in the Wushuang continent to obtain battle merits suddenly noticed that there was a violent battle in the sky. The commotion was so great that it was not at the level of a divine ocean realm cultivator. Now, in the 9 states constellations outside the Wushuang continent, only Meng Jie was there. Therefore, no one knew who he was fighting with. The divine ocean realm cultivators who went to the Wushuang continent to earn battle merits were not at a high level. Naturally, they could not investigate. After observing for a while, they felt that the battle was getting louder and louder. It was even mixed with Meng Jie's roars and roars. Those divine ocean realm cultivators immediately realized that something was wrong. They quickly sent people back to the 9 states through the transmission array to pass on the message. As the message was passed on, many constellations that could be contacted quickly learned about the situation. They began to contact the current guardian of the 9 states, Lu Yi. Only then did he receive messages from his battlefield imprint and musical notes. Lu Yi quickly scanned through all the information, but he still didn't have a clear understanding of the situation. Now, the Wushuang continent only knew that Meng Jie was fighting with an enemy, but no one knew what kind of enemy it was. If it was before, the 9 states would not be able to provide support in such a situation. After all, the distance was too far. But now, there was a possibility of support. After pondering for a while, Lu Yi quickly sent messages everywhere. He ordered people to pass on the message to the Wushuang continent. All the 9 states cultivators were to lie low and hide the passage to the 9 states at the same time. He did not choose to recall them because the 9 states cultivators were scattered all over the Wushuang continent. There was no time to gather everyone. If the enemy broke through Meng Jie's line of defense and rashly recalled the 9 states cultivators, it would only lead the enemy to the transmission channel. That was the work left behind by Yu Xing. Now, no one in the 9 states could repair or even rebuild it. Once it was destroyed, the 9 states would lose contact with the Wushuang continent. Therefore, it was necessary to conceal it. Chapter 1358. Of course, there was another possibility. The enemy fighting with Meng Jie was not some intelligent creature, but a star beast. If that was the case, then there was no need to be too nervous. Because star beasts basically would not descend into the critical region. They usually roamed the starry sky unrestrained. But everything had to be guarded against. Lu Yi could only prepare for the worst and the most appropriate response. After the order was passed down, Lu Yi stood up and walked out of seclusion. 2 people hurriedly walked over. They were the 2 9 region star mansions who had returned from the starry sky a few days ago. They had come to check the many jade slips. They had obviously also received the news. They looked at each other and Lu Yi nodded, indicating that he already knew the situation. At the same time, he said, "Please wait a moment." His divine sense surged and sent out a message. "Little 9, how many star mansions are in the realm right now?" Little 9's voice sounded in his ear, "Only Missing Moon Immortal." In this half a year, Lu Yi had been cultivating at the Guardian Hall. Missing Moon Immortal was at the Jade Blood Sect. Because she had enough spirit jades, she was not in a hurry to enter the starry sky again. As for the other star mansions, they came and went in a hurry. Even if they returned to 9 regions, they would not stay for long. For them, the starry sky was the main stage. Unless they found enough spirit jades and came back to cultivate in seclusion. Open the teleportation authority of the Pillar of Heavenly Secrets to Missing Moon Immortal. At the same time, Lu Yi sent a message to Missing Moon Immortal, asking her to use the Pillar of Heavenly Secrets to teleport to the Guardian Hall. He asked Little 9 again, "If I fly straight from 9 regions to Wushuang continent, how many star mansions can I meet in time?" Little 9 could sense the location of those star mansions as long as it was within the range of her senses. Therefore, It was the most convenient and fast to ask Little Nine about this. After a moment, Little Nine gave the answer. Lu Yi understood. According to Little Nine's answer, he sent messages one by one, asking them to rush to the designated location and wait silently. However, no one knew what had happened at Wushuang continent. Even if he could not win, Meng Jie, a body cultivator, would not die so easily. He was afraid that he had encountered some intelligent creature. If that was the case, 9 regions had to quickly support him. Lu Ye's arrangements at the moment were all preparations for support. He strived to bring the most people to Wushuang continent in the shortest time. The Thought Moon Immortals figure suddenly appeared from the Heaven's Fate Pillar. "Let's go!" Lu Yi called out and took the lead to rush out of the hall. The 3 figures followed closely behind. Lu Yi unleashed the silverfish planetary boat and transformed it into a 20-feet-long ferry. Then, he flashed into the boat and assumed command over the core of the formation. Nian Yu Immortal was familiar with the route, and the other 2-star mansions followed closely behind. In the next moment, the silver fish shook slightly and flew away. The 9 continents constellation at present, there were almost 1,000 people, but because they were scattered all over the place, they could not bring many people with them along the way. Now that reinforcements were the priority, and time was of the essence, Lu Yi could not make a detour to pick them up. Furthermore, the size of the silver fish was limited, so the number of people that could ride it was limited. While controlling the silver fish to fly, Lu Yi was also dealing with the constant influx of information. Currently, many constellations knew about the situation at the Peerless Continent and wanted to know more about it. The current guardian, Lu Yi, was the best person to ask. However, Lu Yi had not figured it out himself, so he could not give an accurate and effective answer. There were also many constellations that wanted to immediately set off for the Peerless Continent, but they were all dissuaded by Lu Yi. After all, the journey was long, and without a planetary boat, it would take too much time. If they rushed over to provide reinforcements, there would not be enough time. However, although he dissuaded them, he was not sure how effective it would be. In the administrative area of Cunfa River City, between the lines of the messages that were sent by many constellations, they really wanted to contribute. Perhaps they agreed verbally, but in reality, they were rushing in the direction of the Peerless Continent. This was not something that Lu Yi could dissuade. They were all constellations and had their own way of doing things. At most, Lu Yi would give suggestions, but he would not order others around. 2 hours later, a sword light suddenly lit up in front of them, followed by a sword chime that seeped into one's mind. That was not an attack, but a signal. Lu Yi controlled the silver fish to fly near the sword light. Jian Guhong was preparing to return to the 9 continents because he heard that there were more things in the Guardian Hall, so he wanted to come back and take a look. Coincidentally, he encountered this incident and was picked up by Lu Yi. They continued to move forward, picking up 1 or 2 people along the way. One day later, Jian Guhong suddenly sighed, looked at Lu Yi and said, "We have to prepare for the worst." Lu Yi nodded. Both of them knew that what Meng Jie encountered was most likely not a star beast, because if it was a star beast, there should be new news from the Peerless Continent at this time. However, the Peerless Continent was in a state of silence, which meant that the crisis was not over yet. Of course, it was also possible that Meng Jie had died in the battle and could not send a message. However, according to the previous news, Meng Jie roared angrily during the battle. This was most likely a warning to the cultivators of the 9 continents on the Peerless Continent. A few days later, the silver fish picked up the last 2 people. They were Feng Wujiang and Qiu Min. At this point, the silver fish was full. Including Lu Yi, there were a total of 9 people, and they could not take any more cultivators. On the star boat, everyone was cultivating with the help of spiritual jades. Although they could not improve their strength too much in such a short time, it was still better than nothing. After picking up the eldest senior brother and Qiu Min, Lu Yi took out the remaining purple and white jade talismans and distributed them. Under his guidance, everyone also nourished these talismans in their bodies, ready to be used in battle at any time. Lu Ye's mind was tense at all times. He constantly identified the stars around him, making sure that he would not deviate. Flying in the starry sky like this, the slightest deviation was not acceptable. Fortunately, he had been in the Guardian Hall for half a year and knew the star map around the 9 continents like the back of his hand. Even if there was a slight mistake in the flight, he could quickly adjust. His heart was actually very restless and uneasy. Because most of his few friends and family were on the Peerless continent, he could not know the situation there, let alone their safety. This was undoubtedly a torment. However, he did not show it on his face, because he knew that he had to be calm in this kind of situation. The silver fish traveled through the starry sky, getting closer and closer to the Peerless continent. About a month later, just as they arrived at the starry sky around the Peerless continent, Lu Yi suddenly sensed something and turned his head to look in a certain direction. At the same time, all the constellations on the star boat opened their eyes. "There's a battle," Feng Wujiang said. "It's Meng Jie's aura," Jian Guhong said. He had been with Meng Jie for dozens of years, so he was very familiar with his aura. Meng Jie was not dead. This was undoubtedly good news. Everyone who had been waiting for a month could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Because of this, they could be sure that the enemy Meng Jie encountered was not so powerful that it made them despair. Therefore, it was very likely that the enemy was also a constellation. Otherwise, Meng Jie would not be alive after such a long time. When Jian Guhong finished speaking, Lu Yi had already stopped the star boat. Without needing him to say anything, a group of people flashed out and activated their concealment techniques, restraining their auras and spiritual power. It had to be said that compared to the dwarf race, the cultivators of the 9 states were not at the same level of proficiency in battle at all. This was because the environment they grew up in was different. The dwarf race might have a better domain and better cultivation conditions, but they also lacked many hardships in the process of growing up. The cultivators of the 9 states were different. Every one of them had braved the wind and rain and had experienced countless battles in their lives. Which one of them was not a battle veteran who could advance to a constellation alive? At this moment, their eyes met and they had already formulated a battle plan. The 9 of them dispersed without a sound, like 9 fish diving into the sea. Lu Yi slowly approached the battlefield like a ghost. It was not until a moment later that he finally saw the situation on the battlefield clearly. It was indeed Meng Jie, but at this moment, his situation was not optimistic. The clothes on his upper body had long been torn, and the trousers on his lower body were full of traces of blood. The surface of his body was crisscrossed with hideous and terrifying wounds. Some were in the process of healing, and some were newly added. For a constellation realm cultivator, as long as he recovered in time, flesh wounds were not injuries at all. However, Meng Jie still looked scarred at this moment, which showed that his situation was not good. This was also thanks to him being an individual cultivator. Otherwise, the situation would only be worse. Therefore, one was a spell cultivator, and the other was a weapon cultivator. The spell cultivator attacked from afar, and the weapon cultivator stayed close to him. Their cooperation was very good. Meng Jie was basically in a state of being beaten and did not have much strength to fight back. He tried to escape from the battle many times, but he was firmly entangled by the weapon cultivator and could not get away. Lu Yi did not know how long Meng Jie had been like this, but it was obviously not a month. Under such a disadvantage, Meng Jie could not hold on for such a long time. He was only glad that he decisively brought people to support when he received the news. Otherwise, half a day later, Meng Jie would have died here. On the opposite side, a flash of sword light suddenly burst forth. Taking advantage of the spell cultivator's spell to attack Meng Jie, it went straight for his vital point. The spell cultivator turned pale with fright. He and his companions had been chasing Meng Jie for a month. Unfortunately, the enemy's skin was rough and his flesh was thick. He did not take the small injuries seriously at all, and repeatedly escaped. However, this guy jumped out from time to time to provoke them. This time, he finally seized the opportunity and was about to kill Meng Jie. Who would have thought that he would be sneak attacked? In a month, this guy did not have any companions. Where did he come from? Realizing that things were not going well, the the spell cultivator immediately took out a spiritual treasure and turned it into a protective shield to protect himself. However, in the next moment, he felt that murderous intents from all directions had locked onto him. For a moment, his mind was in chaos. When Jian Guhong made his move, the people from Jiuzhou also made their moves together. Lu Yi even turned into a flowing light and rushed directly toward the weapon cultivator who was fighting with Meng Jie. Chapter 1359. Meng Jie was obviously shocked by this turn of events. From what he knew, even if 9 provinces had rushed over to provide support after receiving the news, it was impossible for them to arrive so quickly. He knew that he was doomed today, so he had been looking for a chance to perish together with the weapon cultivator. Unfortunately, the difference in cultivation realm made him helpless. He thought that he would die here, but he didn't expect a sudden change. The sudden outburst of many auras not only surprised the enemy, but also caught Meng Jie off guard. But immediately after, he was delighted because he felt a few familiar auras. He immediately changed from defense to offense, entangling the weapon cultivator who was about to retreat. He was at a disadvantage. His move was undoubtedly extremely risky because if the opposite weapon cultivator didn't retreat, he would have to face the opponent head-on, and the outcome would certainly not be good. But he had an excellent grasp of the opportunity because he was sure that the weapon cultivator would retreat, which was also the most instinctive response to an unexpected situation. Moreover, even if the weapon cultivator didn't retreat, his attack would slow down and leave most of his strength for defense. In this way, he wouldn't be in danger of losing his life. Meng Jie made the right choice. The weapon cultivator couldn't get rid of him for a while, which made him a little angry. He realized that if he didn't kill Meng Jie, he wouldn't be able to escape from the battle. He urged his spiritual power, and the spear in his hand bloomed with light. Like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, it pierced toward Meng Jie's eye. Meng Jie didn't even bat an eyelid. He didn't even have the intention to dodge such an attack. Instead, he stretched out his hand to grab the opponent's spear. It was as if he was going to use one of his eyes to suppress the enemy. The weapon cultivator secretly cursed the enemy for being crazy. In fact, he and his companions had seen such a crazy scene many times in a month. It was precisely because of Meng Jie's crazy attitude that these 2 middle-stage constellation cultivators were somewhat hesitant to attack. They were entangled for a month and couldn't finish their work. He really couldn't understand which region this cultivator came from to be so unafraid of death. Were there any cultivators in 9 provinces who were afraid of death? There were, but the relative numbers were definitely not many. Spirit Stream Battlefield, Cloud River Battlefield. On the battlefield, the cultivators of the 2 camps fought crazily. After rounds of elimination, whether the survivors were elites or not, they had at least faced death. If nothing unexpected happened, one of Meng Jie's eyes would be destroyed. Perhaps his life would be in danger, but the enemy's spear would also be suppressed by him. For a weapon cultivator, the spiritual treasure he used for close combat was half of his life. Once the long spear was clamped down, he would be like a tiger without its teeth. At this critical juncture, a figure charged out from the side and kicked Meng Jie's shoulder, sending him flying. Feng Wujiang had made a move at the critical moment. Meng Jie sensed the familiar aura and realized that the reinforcements from the 9 regions had arrived, but he was still not clear about the specific situation. However, 9 people from the 9 regions had rushed over. How could Feng Wujiang watch his old subordinate lose an eye? This kick was not polite at all. The main thing was that he could not hold back. Against a strong and sturdy weapon cultivator, he had to use a lot of strength. Meng Jie was directly sent flying by the kick. The weapon cultivator's long spear stabbed into the air. Before he could retrieve his spear, he saw a young man with drooping eyes and a cold expression approaching him with a saber in his hand from where Meng Jie had been standing. Early star constellation realm cultivation. The weapon cultivator took the opportunity to shake the long spear that he had thrust out, turning it into spear shadows that enveloped the newcomer. He did not feel the slightest pressure against an early star constellation realm middle stage cultivator, so he planned to kill him with one strike. However, as the crescent moon-like saber light shone, the weapon cultivator's expression changed drastically. The clash between the long saber and the long spear made him immediately feel the opponent's incomparably violent attack. That aggressive aura actually made his mind tremble and uneasy. He hastily steadied himself and roared. His spiritual power surged wildly as he fought with the opponent. The more he fought, the more alarmed he became. Because this weapon cultivator who looked like he was only at the early star constellation realm actually gave him a feeling of invincibility. Every slash of the opponent's saber was powerful and heavy. Moreover, the speed of the saber was extremely fast, and the angle was extremely tricky. For a moment, he was actually a little overwhelmed. If not for the opponent's spiritual power fluctuations being at the early star constellation realm, he would even suspect that the opponent was at the late star constellation realm in disguise. He was no match for the opponent. Not only was he no match for the opponent, his life might be in danger at any time. The weapon cultivator was terrified. He really could not understand why the difference in strength was so great when there was only a small gap in cultivation. It was also at this moment that, accompanied by a short scream, the aura of life was annihilated. The weapon cultivator's expression changed drastically. In his perception, the aura belonging to his companion had disappeared. He immediately understood that his spell cultivator companion had died in battle. For the cultivators of the 9 prefectures who were extremely experienced in battle, there had always been a consensus when fighting with the enemy, and that was to kill the one with the longest hands first. Not only because their hands were long and could launch long-range attacks, but also because their skin was thin and their flesh was brittle, so they were relatively easier to kill. Therefore, when the cultivators of the 9 prefectures fought in groups, the spell cultivators were the ones who were most likely to be attacked frequently. It was the same here. Lu Yi and the other 8 concealed themselves. Other than Lu Yi and Feng Wujiang who came to support Meng Jie, the remaining 7 people all went to deal with the mid-stage star constellation spell cultivator. Moreover, among these 7 people, there were 2 sword cultivators who were famous for killing. As Jian Guhong's sword light shone, the 7 people poured out all their attacks in one go. The spell cultivator died an unjust death. In the face of a sudden sneak attack, his response was actually very fast. First, he blessed himself with a defensive spiritual treasure, then urged his spiritual power to protect himself. However, this kind of defense could not block Jian Guhong and the other 6's attacks from all directions and angles at all. The defensive spiritual treasure was broken, and the protective spiritual power collapsed. The spell cultivator, who no longer had any protection, died. This was the first time the 9 prefectures constellation clashed with the constellations of the outside world, so no one dared to hold back. They all went all out. In the end, after a round of attacks, the enemy whose cultivation base was 1 level higher than theirs died. All of them were confused. That was it? If they were in the same situation, if they had mid-stage constellation cultivation base, even if they encountered the same sneak attack, they should not have died so easily. After a slight pause, they hurried over to support Lu Yi. When China's Lai Hor raised his head and looked over, he saw a scene that made their hearts surge with emotion. On the other side of the battlefield, Lu Ye's long saber flashed with light, suppressing the enemy to the point that they almost had no power to fight back. Even Feng Wujiang, who had kicked Meng Jie away, stood to the side and watched. He had no intention of interfering, mainly because he was a little dumbfounded. Being able to kill 1 person with 7 people in an instant was not something to be proud of. However, to be able to single-handedly crush the enemy with a lower cultivation was something that made people gasp in amazement. The battle did not last long. It was not too long. After 10 breaths, as Lu Yi slashed down with his saber, blood splattered, and a head flew out. The eyes were wide open, as if he had died with a grievance. Meng Jie grimaced in pain as he flew back, holding his arm. That kick from Feng Wujiang was really painful. He just happened to see the enemy's head fly out. After fighting with the enemy for a month, he was very clear about the enemy's strength. He had no chance of winning in a one-on-one fight, but at this moment, the enemy, who seemed very powerful to him, was actually killed by Lu Yi single-handedly. The speed was so fast that it was like cutting through a Gordian knot. The group of constellations was silent. They suddenly felt that they were old. They also felt gratified that the 9 states had a successor. Back when they were in the divine ocean, these constellations had basically seen how extraordinary Lu Yi was. But now that they had all been promoted to constellation and stood on the same starting line, they thought that even if there was a gap in their strength, it would not be too big. But now it seemed that extraordinary people were extraordinary after all. The divine ocean was like that, and so were the constellations. Lu Yi put away his saber and turned to look at Meng Jie. Only 2? Meng Jie shook his head. For there are still 2 inside. Hearing this, everyone's faces darkened. This was not the situation they wanted to see. If there were only 2 people, there was no doubt that this time the crisis would be resolved. But there were 4 of them, and 2 of them were inside the realm. The situation was not good. There were still many 9 states cultivators in the Wushuang continent. Those 9 states cultivators were unable to resist at all, and they might not even be able to hide. Tell us in detail, Feng Wujiang said. After listening to Meng Jie's explanation, everyone finally understood the current situation. A month ago, Meng Jie encountered 2 foreign constellations in the nearby starry sky. They were the 2 people who had just died. Sensing the other party's ill intentions, Meng Jie wanted to escape, but the other party relentlessly pursued him. He had no choice but to fight. At the same time, he roared angrily to warn the 9 states cultivators in the Wushuang continent. It was also at that time that the 9 states cultivators noticed the situation and sent a message back to the 9 states. 1 against 2, and there was a gap in cultivation. Meng Jie was naturally not a match for them. But he did not dare to escape too far, because once he left, the 9 states cultivators would have no protection. So he lay in ambush nearby, showing up from time to provoke the 2 people. In the end, 2 more constellations appeared in a few days, and one of them was at the late stage. This time, Meng Jie was even more defeated. He did not even fight with the other party and fled all the way. The newly appeared late-stage constellation did not pursue him. Instead, he led the other constellation into the Wushuang continent. He probably also felt that his 2 mid-stage constellation companions were enough to deal with an early-stage constellation. This entanglement lasted for a month. There was not much Meng Jie could do, but he kept fighting back and forth with the enemy, until today. During this period, he kept getting injured. Today, he was also a little careless and did not get rid of the other party's entanglement in time, causing him to be in danger. If Lu Yi and the others had not come late, they would probably only be able to collect his corpse. So, you don't know what's going on in the Wushuang continent now? Feng Wujiang asked. Meng Jie shook his head. Ever since those 2 people entered the Wushuang continent that day, they have not appeared again. He had been entangled with 2 enemies and could not enter the Wushuang continent to investigate. He really did not know the current situation of the Wushuang continent. Chapter 1360. The origin of the enemy was unknown, their goal was unknown, and the situation of the Wushuang continent was unknown. The situation was quite bad. Lu Yi frowned inwardly. If he had known earlier, he would not have killed that soldier cultivator so quickly. He would have captured him alive and obtained some information. However, he did not have the ability to predict the future. Before he killed the enemy, how could he have known that the situation would be like this? This place is not close to the Wushuang continent. The commotion from our previous battle should not have spread there. Feng Wujiang said, therefore, even if there are still 2 constellations inside, it's very likely that they have not noticed our arrival. They might not even have noticed the death of their companion. The 2 constellations that were killed earlier did not have the chance or sign of sending a message. Sneak in, find them, and kill them one by one. Someone said. Everyone nodded. Under the current circumstances, only this method was the safest. Even though they had 10 people on their side, it was impossible for them to attack openly, as that would only alert the enemy. Especially when the enemy had a cultivator at the advanced stage of star constellation. He had fought with the late-stage constellation of the Miniman clan before and knew the strength of this level of cultivator. It was not something that the current 9 prefectures constellations could contend against. Even if they had the absolute advantage in numbers, if they really fought, they might not be able to gain much of an advantage. The Miniman clan was affected by the environment they grew up in and their reliance on talismans. Their overall strength was actually weaker. This was something that Lu Yi had discovered before. It was the same principle as the cultivators of the small sects in the 9 prefectures. However, cultivators who relied too much on external forces would more or less affect the progress of their own strength. After this time's Black Abyss martial arts exhibition, the Miniman clan members also discovered this problem. Or rather, they had discovered it long ago, but they did not have the courage to change it. This time, Lu Yi, a human, taught them a good lesson, and finally made them determined to change the situation. Lu Yi could defeat a late-stage constellation of the Miniman clan in a head-on confrontation, but he might not be able to defeat a late-stage constellation of another race. Especially when the other party was also a human. After the discussion was settled, everyone immediately took action. A moment later, outside the Wushuang continent, 10 figures quietly sneaked into the realm. When one's cultivation reached the level of constellation, no matter what sect they belonged to, they would more or less master some concealment methods. Among the 10 people, the concealment of Thought Moon Immortal and the other ghost cultivator was undoubtedly the most perfect. In this domain, ghost cultivators had an unparalleled advantage. Next was Lu Yi. The concealment and breath-holding spiritual tattoos were very effective when used below the Divine Sea realm, but they were not good enough for the surveillance of Constellation Realm cultivators. These 2 spiritual tattoos were also part of Lu Ye's plan to rededuce and improve them. However, due to his limited energy, it was not their turn yet. As for the rest of the people, they could be considered to have concealed themselves, but it was hard to say how effective they would be. The team of 10 people was divided into 5 groups of 2 and spread out in all directions. Lu Yi and the Thought Moon Immortal were together. There was only one thing they needed to do now, and that was to find the traces of the 2 foreign constellations. Then, they would act according to the circumstances. It was not a simple task to search for traces of 2 people in such a large domain, especially when they were in a concealed state. No one could make too much noise. However, Lu Ye's luck was surprisingly good, or rather, the other party had no intention of hiding at all. A mass of ghastly black fog was rolling on top of a mountain peak. Ghostly wails and howls could be heard from within, sounding extremely horrifying. There were also many miserable shrieks, as if someone was being tortured. When they heard these sounds and saw the scale of the black fog, both Lu Yi and the Thought Moon Immortal's hearts sank. They had some vague guesses. When they got closer, they were even more certain of their guesses. This was because a large banner could be vaguely seen fluttering in the wind amidst the rolling black fog. A graceful figure sat upright under the banner. The black fog rolled, and the figure was faintly discernible. She was like a true ghost. The Myriad Soul Banner. The Thought Moon Immortal secretly transmitted her voice to Lu Yi. Lu Ye's expression was grave, and she nodded slightly. After studying a sea of jade slips in the minor human tribe's Rest Abyss Pavilion, the 2 of them had some basic understanding of many things in the cosmos. The various information about the Myriad Soul Banner was recorded in a jade slip in the Rest Abyss Pavilion. The reason why there were records was mainly because this item was too famous. Moreover, the requirements to refine it were not high, and its might was not weak. It was very popular among cultivators with evil natures. The Myriad Soul Banner was a treasure. Moreover, it was a treasure that could continuously improve its quality. During the refining process, one needed to extract the soul avatar of a living being and seal it in the banner. The stronger the soul avatar sealed, the more powerful the Myriad Soul Avatar would be. When facing an enemy, a banner could be summoned, and it could transform into a ghost domain to fight against the enemy. The banner user could move freely within, and their figure was invisible. Those who were trapped would suffer the pain of the soul avatar's torture and would have no way to escape. The jade slip in the Rest Abyss Pavilion recorded that there was a precedent of a mighty expert summoning a banner to wipe out all the living beings in a large domain. because the refinement of this banner was extremely cruel and inhumane. On the surface, this thing could be considered a taboo item. However, human nature was complicated. The more taboo it was, the more people would pursue it. Since ancient times, it was unknown how many people had refined this kind of evil treasure. It was also unknown how many living beings had suffered because of this treasure. Their soul avatar was trapped in the banner, suffering torture, and living a life worse than death. Lu Yi did not expect to see something like the myriad soul banner here. Moreover, looking at the scene in front of him, that person was obviously improving the quality of his myriad soul banner. He finally understood the purpose of the two enemy constellations entering the Wushuang continent. To the owner of the myriad soul banner, the cultivators of the 9 provinces in the Wushuang continent were great materials to improve the quality of this evil banner. Who knew how many cultivators of the 9 provinces had already been killed? The moment he received the news, he ordered the cultivators of the 9 provinces to hide. However, the concealment of cultivators of the divine ocean realm at most, how much effect could it have on the constellations? Unless they hid well enough, the constellations could still easily find them when they scanned with their divine sense. He suppressed the nervousness in his heart and immersed his mind to check his battlefield imprint. Third senior brother Xiao Xinghe's battlefield imprint was still there, which meant that he was still alive. Fourth senior brother's was also there. Lin Yinxiu, Feng Wuchen, and Yi were all there. Hua Xie was also there. He heaved a sigh of relief. However, he could feel that there were indeed some people missing from his battlefield imprint. This also meant that these missing people were already dead. However, he did not know if they died in the 9 provinces or here, and there was no way to find out. Silently observing, Lu Yi and Yan Yuxian did not make a move. Although they found traces of one of the enemy constellations, the whereabouts of the other person, they still needed to wait for eldest senior brother and the others to investigate carefully. However, they only waited for a moment before the sound of an intense battle suddenly came from a certain direction. It was obviously the aftermath of a battle between cultivators of the constellation level. They were exposed. The people of the 9 provinces were all at the early stage of the constellation level, and they were not very proficient in concealment. If there was a difference in cultivation level, it was normal for them to be exposed. Lu Yi immediately concluded that the person on his side was at the early stage of the constellation level. He could not judge the other party's cultivation level previously. The black fog of the myriad soul banner was rolling, and the fluctuations of spiritual power were extremely heterogeneous. The interference was too serious. However, the others had already been exposed, which meant that the other constellation's perception was very strong, and should be at the late stage of the constellation level. Then the one on his side was definitely at the early stage. Almost at the same time as the sound of the battle in the distance came, the graceful figure in the myriad soul banner noticed it. However, before she could figure out the situation, in her perception, 2 sharp auras suddenly appeared nearby and locked onto her. She quickly looked over, and through the black fog, she saw Lu Yi and Yan Yuxian's figures suddenly burst out. Yan Yuxian's body merged with the sword light, and the speed that burst out in an instant was a bit faster than Lu Ye's. She plunged into the black fog of the myriad soul banner, and the long sword in her hand bloomed with thousands of brilliance, like a waterfall pouring down on the other party. The woman cried out in alarm and quickly urged the power of the myriad soul banner. In an instant, the sound of wailing ghosts and howling wolves became louder and louder. Lu Yi followed closely behind Nian Yuxian into the banner's domain and immediately felt the strange power of the banner. The divine soul was obviously impacted. The impact was not great, but it was extremely frequent. Coupled with the sound of wailing ghosts and howling wolves, it was easy for people with weak minds to lose their minds. However, the 2 people who had broken into the banner's domain at this moment, one was a sword cultivator known for his slaughter and the other was a weapon cultivator who had experienced many battles, so this method had little effect on the 2 of them. In the banner's domain, countless sealed soul avatars pounced at the 2 of them like ants. Once bitten, they were bound to suffer a great deal of soul damage. Pain in their souls. Lu Ye's saber flew out, and with a series of shrill screams, the soul avatars that pounced at him collapsed and turned into nothingness. The soul-severing saber was a treasure that specifically targeted the soul, so how could these soul avatars sealed in the banner block his attack? Riding the wind and breaking the waves, he was invincible, and under the horrified gaze of the banner master, he arrived in front of him. The anger in his heart made him want to chop this woman to pieces, but in the end, he did not do so. He just stabbed his saber straight through the other party's heart. Taking a closer look, he found that this woman was extremely beautiful, and her demeanor was full of a sense of weakness. Anyone who saw her would feel pity for her. But the things she did, her heart was like a scorpion's. Lu Yi arrived first, subduing the woman with a single strike of his saber. Nian Yu Xian also arrived, her sword resting on the other party's slender white neck. The sharp edge of the sword cut through the other party's skin, causing blood to flow. This dark red color in the dark ghost domain was particularly dazzling. The two of them stood on the left and right, each of them releasing a biting cold killing intent. The woman in the middle trembled, her expression terrified. She had never imagined that she would suffer such an unexpected calamity while trying to improve the quality of the 10,000 soul banner. I'll only say it once. Do as I say. Lu Yi looked at the woman, his expression calm. Nod if you understand. The woman nodded obediently. She could feel that the man in front of her was boiling with anger under his calm appearance. The more such a person was, the more terrifying they were. Chapter 1361. Keep the 10,000 soul banner. Lu Yi ordered. The woman did not dare to disobey. She channeled her spiritual energy into the banner in front of her. The whole process was extremely cooperative, and she did not even dare to make any mistakes. There was no other way. In such a situation, if she dared to make any strange movements, she would die in an instant. When the banner disappeared and all the souls were taken back into the banner, Lu Yi quietly extended his hand to her. The woman obediently handed the 10,000 soul banner to Lu Yi. Lu Yi put away the banner and gave Thought Moon Immortal a look. Nian Yu Immortal immediately took out an immortal binding rope and tied the woman up tightly. Only then did Lu Yi pull out the Panshan saber from her body. When the blood burst out, the woman softly groaned. Her voice was very seductive, and her two clear eyes were filled with tears. It was obvious that he had hurt her. Along with her groan, there was a crisp slap. The pitiful woman's head tilted, and a palm print appeared on her snow-white cheek. Thought Moon Immortal shook her hand and said indifferently, "Behave." The woman lowered her head, and her tear-filled eyes were filled with resentment. The battle in the distance was still going on. Just as Lu Yi thought, their constellation was exposed because they were facing a late-stage constellation. However, as the battle broke out, the constellation from 9 regions quickly came to support, and the battlefield also began to move on a large scale. When Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal caught the woman and rushed to the scene, the battle had already subsided. The 9 constellations from both sides were confronting each other. The reason why they were confronting each other was that the late-stage constellation had shamelessly captured many hostages. He was originally looking for traces of 9 regions cultivators in the Wushuang continent, and then captured them and sent them to the woman for her to upgrade the 10,000 soul banner. This time, he captured more than 10 people, including Deity Ocean and True Lake cultivators. Along the way, he sensed the aura of 9 regions constellation and immediately launched an attack. In the early stage of the 2 constellation, he did not put them in his eyes. However, as the battle began, he sensed the aura of constellation coming from all directions. He immediately realized that something was wrong. Although he was strong, the number of enemies was too much. He immediately returned to the cultivators of the 9 states who had been captured by him before. He was ready to identify the situation and make a plan. These cultivators of the 9 states who had been captured had been sealed by him. Even if they were at the divine ocean realm, they could not escape. From his point of view, the attacking constellations must be from the same realm as the cultivators he captured. With the hostages in his hands, the enemy would be wary of attacking and he would have the upper hand. Just as he had expected, after his actions, The 8 constellations of the 9 prefectures indeed stopped and formed groups of 2, surrounding him. He began to send a message to his companions, but to his shock, none of his companions replied. Just as he was wondering if something had happened to his companion, Lu Yi and thought Moon Immortal carried that woman and rushed over. This late-stage constellation realm expert's face sank slightly when he saw the woman's miserable state, and he realized that his other 2 companions were probably dead. This was because the body cultivator that his 2 companions had been chasing was here. His gaze swept across the people of the 9 states, and this late-stage constellation realm expert said indifferently, "Who's in charge?" It was rare to see a lineup of 10 early-stage constellations. Generally speaking, it was impossible for a realm to only have early-stage constellations. There would always be some mid-stage or late-stage constellations. Unless it was a large realm that had just been promoted not long ago, such a special situation would occur. Or rather, there were stronger experts hiding. However, in such a situation, he did not feel that the enemy needed to hide. Therefore, he boldly guessed that the realm these people were in was most likely a newly promoted large realm that had just been connected to the starry sky. This was why there would be a lineup of early-stage constellations. With this thought, this person's mind calmed down. For a newly promoted large realm, the cultivators born in it would not have much experience, and their strength would be limited. Therefore, although it looked like he was at a disadvantage, he was confident that he could resolve it. At the very least, he still had the ability to escape from here alone. It was just a group of early-stage constellations. He really did not care about them. First, he had to figure out who was in charge of these people. Amidst the silence, Lu Yi said indifferently, "How should I address you?" The late-stage constellation realm expert's gaze originally lingered on Jian Guhong and Meng Jie. Based on his experience, he could see that these 2 were the oldest among the people present. Under the premise of having the same level of cultivation, it was normal for the older person to be in charge. However, the one who did not want to speak was actually the youngest one. He looked Lu Yi up and down and did not see anything special. He said arrogantly, "Zhao Tianmu." Lu Yi nodded slightly. "Li Tai Bai." After suffering at the hands of the dwarf tribe, Lu Yi was not even willing to reveal his real name when facing cultivators from other realms. Who knew if these guys would associate him with Lu Yi from the 9 Heavens realm? The expressions of the people of the 9 states did not change. "Fellow Taoist Li." Lu Yi raised his hand to stop him. "Our paths are different. You are not worthy of being called fellow Taoist." Zhao Tianmu frowned slightly, but did not pursue the matter. He said indifferently, "Since that is the case, I will not force you. Looking at the current situation, what do you plan to do?" Lu Yi glanced at the dozen or so cultivators beside him, then turned his head to look at the weak woman beside him. He said, "You have hostages in your hands, and so do I. You release the hostages and I will release the hostages. It is very fair." Zhao Tianmu said, "Very good. I think so too. However, you only have 1 person, and I have more than 10 people. There is a huge difference in numbers. I have a constellation realm expert, and you have a deity ocean realm expert. There is also a difference in cultivation. Therefore, if we release the hostages, no one will lose out." Zhao Tianmu shook his head. "Everyone is eyeing me covetously. Can I understand that once I release the hostages, you will all swarm me? You are a late-stage cultivator, and we are all early-stage cultivators. Even if we all swarm you, what can we do to you?" Zhao Tianmu chuckled. "That's reasonable. If I want to leave, you won't be able to stop me. But that's not how it's done." "Then what do you think? You can say it and we can discuss it." Zhao Tianmu's expression turned serious. It was obvious that he had a plan. He said, "I will release half of the hostages in exchange for my junior sister. When the 2 of us leave this world, I will release the other half." Lu Yi shook his head slowly. "Oh no. If so, who can guarantee that you will not kill the other half before you leave?" Zhao Tianmu said, "I am a late-stage constellation realm expert. What fun is there in killing these deity ocean realm experts? Besides, you don't seem to have a choice." As he said that, he raised his hand and grabbed a deity ocean realm expert. In front of him, Zhao Tianmu grabbed him by the neck and said with a smile, "I have so many people in my hands. Killing a few doesn't seem to be a big deal. Either you agree to my proposal or I will kill a few of you until you agree." Lu Yi looked at him quietly and did not say a word. Zhao Tianmu's grip grew stronger and stronger, and the deity ocean realm expert's expression began to change. Zhao Tianmu saw that Lu Yi was hesitating and seemed a little proud. He urged, "If you want to make a decision, you have to be quick. I can't guarantee that I won't make a mistake. Killing a deity ocean realm expert is as easy as killing an ant." Lu Yi turned his gaze to the deity ocean realm expert. "Which sector you from?" The deity ocean realm expert said with difficulty, "Dingzhou, Chaonan sect." The deity ocean realm expert looked like he was in pain, but he grinned. "Let them die with me." Lu Yi nodded and did not move. He held the hilt of his saber and slashed it out. The saber flashed and returned to its scabbard. The smile on Zhao Tianmu's face froze instantly. He looked at Lu Yi in disbelief, then slowly shifted his gaze to the weak woman beside Lu Yi. The woman clearly didn't realize what had happened until she felt a sharp pain in her arm. Only then did she realize what had happened and look down. Blood seeped out of the clothes on her upper arm and soon dyed her clothes red. The pain suddenly became intense. Then her arm fell to the ground with her torn clothes. Blood spurted out. "Ah!" After being stunned for a moment, the woman let out a shrill scream. Her voice was filled with pain and fear. "Shut up!" Nian Yu Xian, who was standing on the other side of her, calmly scolded. The woman's scream came to an abrupt stop. Tears covered her face. Her entire body was shaking violently. It was unknown whether it was from pain or fear. Lu Ye's calm voice sounded. "There are so many arms and legs. It doesn't matter if I break a few. If you want to make a decision, you should hurry up. I can't guarantee that I won't fail. Maybe I'll cut off her head with the next strike." Zhao Tianmu's face twitched violently. He looked at Lu Yi as if he was looking at a madman. He was just putting on a show. Before he could ensure his junior sister's safety, he could not really kill anyone. He did not want to anger the constellations of the unknown realms and make things unmanageable. The life of a constellation was not something that a group of true lake and deity ocean realm experts could compare to. However, while he had concerns, the other party did not have any. With one strike, an arm was cut off. It was extremely clean and efficient. Before he struck, he even asked if the other party had any last words. Obviously, he was prepared to kill in anger. However, the deity ocean realm expert actually answered seriously. He did not have any intention of begging for mercy or asking for help. He looked at the other constellations. After the young man spoke, no one said a word. Throughout the entire process, they only watched coldly from the sidelines and did not interfere. Even until now, their expressions did not change at all. Only their chi activity was firmly locked onto him. The many deity ocean and true lake cultivators that he had captured were the same. Even when he said that he wanted to kill a few people, he did not feel much fear in their hearts. How was this a madman? This was a group of madmen. A group of madmen who did not care about life and death. Zhao Tianmu's mind shook. He really did not understand which realm they had provoked this time to give birth to so many strong-willed cultivators. If such a realm became powerful, it would be extremely terrifying. Chapter 1362. You can take your time to think about it, but my patience is limited by Zhao Tianmu's thoughts. Lu Ye's calm voice rang out again. Zhao Tianmu looked up and saw that Lu Ye's right hand had rested on the hilt of his saber, his thumb gently stroking it. He looked like he would draw his saber at any moment. Beside Lu Yi, the woman's body trembled uncontrollably. Blood dripped from her severed arm, staining the ground red. Zhao Tianmu immediately understood that he had been too naive. He had deduced that these star constellations came from a newly ascended large realm, so they couldn't possibly have much experience. With so many hostages in hand, he could easily deal with them, but he didn't expect the other party to be so ruthless and decisive. If it was a Yu Yao who had tempered her body to the extreme, she could pay a price to regrow her severed arm. However, for an early-stage star constellation realm cultivator, this kind of injury couldn't be healed. Even if she ascended to Yu Yao in the future, she still wouldn't be able to make up for it. This was because the severed arm was lost before she ascended to Yu Yao. Now that his junior sister had already lost an arm, her future cultivation would be greatly affected. If she lost another arm, her future would be bleak. Seeing how ruthless this young man called Li Taibai was, Zhao Tianmu knew that he would definitely do something like this. On the other hand, even if he killed these true lake and spirit sea cultivators, what good would it do? I agree to your proposal. Zhao Tianmu wasn't a long-winded person. Since he understood the crux of the matter, he immediately agreed. Then he changed the topic. However, I have a request. Lu Yi nodded. We can talk. I want to take this away. Zhao Tianmu pointed at the star constellation realm cultivator who had fallen to the ground. Although she didn't have the ability to regrow her severed arm, she could still find a way to reattach it. Lu Yi looked down, then turned to Nian Yuxian and winked. Nian Yuxian raised her foot, and the severed arm flew toward Zhao Tianmu. Zhao Tianmu caught it. Let her go, Lu Yi said. Zhao Tianmu's face darkened. He released the Chaotian sect divine ocean cultivator and slowly retreated. Soon he retreated to the back of the crowd. Only then did the many true lake and god ocean realms that were captured by him walk towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised his hand and pushed the one-armed woman who was bound by the immortal binding rope. The exchange of hostages went very smoothly because both Lu Yi and Zhao Tianmu knew that neither of them would easily make a move during this process. The 9 prefectures had their concerns. More than 10 true lakes and spirit seas had been sealed, and their spiritual energy had been sealed. If they were to attack, not to mention whether they could do anything to Zhao Tianmu, just the aftermath of the battle would be enough to consign these true lakes and spirit seas to eternal damnation. Zhao Tianmu also wouldn't make a move. He was more eager than the people of the 9 regions to successfully exchange hostages. Both sides had a tacit understanding, so naturally, everything went smoothly. A short while later, the one-armed woman arrived in front of Zhao Tianmu. Zhao Tianmu grabbed her undamaged arm, madly channeled his spiritual energy, and soared into the sky. At the same time, he raised his hand and threw down a round bead that he had prepared beforehand. Intense spiritual energy surged out. Almost at the same time that the bead appeared, the mansions of the 9 prefectures began to move. The tacit understanding between both sides wasn't only reflected in the safe exchange of hostages. Everyone knew that after the exchange of hostages, no one would be easily reconciled. The mansions of the 9 prefectures were already prepared for battle, and so was Zhao Tianmu. If he was alone, there was nothing to be afraid of. Just as he said before, a group of early-stage mansions was nothing in his eyes. However, he now had a companion who was bound by the immortal binding rope. Before helping his companion untie the rope, how could he dare to confront the mansions of the 9 prefectures? He had only used the round spiritual treasure to restrain them. It wouldn't take long for him to leave this place safely with his companions. Once he freed his companions from their restraints, wouldn't he be able to move freely in this vast territory? First, he would kill all the mansions, then slaughter all the living beings in this world to vent his anger. The round bead spirit treasure was a type of rare treasure that could only be used once. Sealed within it were long needles that were as thin as cow hair. Once activated, each of them had the power of an early-stage mansion's full-force attack, and their power was extraordinary. The moment the round bead spirit treasure exploded, hundreds of rays of light shot out in all directions. The people of the 9 prefectures had no choice but to use their methods to resist. Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal madly urged their spiritual energy, not daring to miss any attack. Behind them were the rescued True Lake and Spirit Ocean Immortal, and they couldn't resist such an attack. The chaotic spiritual energy fluctuations calmed down, and the round bead spirit treasure's power was exhausted. The people of the 9 prefectures were unharmed, and their figures had already soared into the sky, chasing after Zhao Tianmu. Lu Yi took the lead and rushed to the front, his cold gaze reflecting the enemy's figure. He absolutely couldn't let Zhao Tianmu escape, or else there would be no end of trouble. However, due to the difference in their cultivations, there was a difference in their flying speed. The flying speed of late-stage mansions was much faster than early-stage mansions. Since Zhao Tianmu flew out with the one-armed woman, it had only been 3 breaths of time, and they had already rushed into the starry sky. Once they entered the starry sky, it would be even more difficult to chase after them, because Zhao Tianmu's speed in the starry sky was definitely not something that early-stage mansions could compare with. Even Lu Yi might not be able to match him. Perhaps feeling that they were out of danger, the one-armed woman whose arm was grabbed by Zhao Tianmu turned her head and saw Lu Ye's figure chasing after them. Her seemingly delicate face revealed an incomparably resentful expression, and her spiritual energy was urged, and a sharp voice came out, "You dare cut off my arm, I will kill your whole family." Lu Yi turned a deaf ear to her. At this moment, his speed had already exceeded his own speed in the starry sky. In such a state, if there were any obstacles in front of him, he would not be able to avoid them. However, since he wanted to chase after a strong enemy, he couldn't care too much about it. But since he wanted to chase after a strong enemy, he couldn't care too much about it. Moreover, Zhao Tianmu was clearing the way ahead, so if there were any obstacles, Zhao Tianmu would be the first to hit them, so the possibility of hitting an obstacle was not high. Just as he was thinking this, a beam of light suddenly came from the front. It was Zhao Tianmu raising his hand to cast a spell. Lu Yi cursed inwardly. He only thought that with someone clearing the way ahead, he wouldn't hit any obstacles, but he forgot that his opponent could attack. There was a difference in their cultivations, and his opponent's attacks were like dragons. Under such speed, Lu Yi had no time to change direction, and could only hurriedly slash forward. Lu Ye's figure paused, and his speed greatly decreased. Even his saber-wielding right arm felt slightly numb. With this delay, the distance between them and Zhao Tianmu grew even further. In the next instant, Feng Wujiang and the others passed by him, but their speed was not as fast as Lu Ye's. In the next instant, Feng Wujiang and the others passed by him, but their speed was not as fast as Lu Ye's. How could they catch up to Zhao Tianmu, who was at the late stage of the constellation realm? If this situation continued, Zhao Tianmu would definitely take the one-armed woman and escape far away. He would help her undo the immortal binding rope's bindings, then come back to find trouble. He couldn't wait any longer. Originally, he had left a backup plan on the one-armed woman to launch a more unexpected attack, but if he didn't use it now, he could only watch as the enemy escaped. The most important thing now was to prevent the enemy from escaping. Holding the mountain pan saber tightly, his gaze locked onto Zhao Tianmu's fleeing figure in the distance. Spiritual energy surged around him, and a profound spirit pattern quickly formed under his feet. When he reappeared, he was already behind the one-armed woman. The one-armed woman was still shouting and cursing, the hatred and viciousness in her eyes almost flowing out. Suddenly, she saw Lu Ye's figure, and her eyes widened. She almost thought she was seeing things. It wasn't until the sudden surge of spiritual energy and the incomparably sharp saber light swept over that she understood. This young man who had severed her arm, whom she bore a grudge against, and who had said he would kill her entire family, had actually chased after her. But how did he do it? Only then did he understand that his figure was blocked, and he had been left far behind. Not only did she not understand, but Zhao Tianmu also didn't understand. As a late-stage constellation realm cultivator, being chased by a group of early-stage cultivators was undoubtedly a very annoying thing. But first, he had to ensure the safety of his junior sister, so he could only escape first. Just as Lu Yi thought, he planned to shake off the pursuers behind him, undo his junior sister's immortal binding rope, and then turn back to find Ma Shi of the 9 regions constellation realm. Gong Quanggong's sudden attack made his expression change, and he hurriedly urged his spiritual energy to protect himself. As Lu Ye's saber chopped down, Zhao Tianmu's expression changed again, because he was shocked to find that the opponent's attack was incomparably sharp. The spiritual energy he hurriedly urged to protect himself was actually almost broken by the other's saber. At the same time, he secretly broke out in a cold sweat, and at the same time, 2 top-grade spirit treasures simultaneously summoned a large bell to protect himself. An arrow pierced through, heading straight for Lu Ye's face. At the same time, he urged his spiritual energy and raised his hand to blast a spell at Lu Yi. Lu Yi could tell at a glance that this Zhao Tianmu was walking the path of a spell cultivator. To him, this was undoubtedly good news. As a weapon cultivator, in such close combat against a spell cultivator, he would undoubtedly have some advantages. But the power of the opponent's spirit treasure couldn't be underestimated. The large bell's defense was extremely tough, and even the mountain pan saber with the divine edge would find it difficult to break through. The arrow spirit treasure was even more agile, shuttling back and forth. Mixed with Zhao Tianmu's spell from time to time, Lu Yi actually couldn't do anything to him for a while. The opponent's battle experience was undoubtedly very rich, and he was able to remain calm in the face of danger. This was the second time Lu Yi fought alone with a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator, but this battle couldn't be compared to the battle in the Black Abyss. In the Black Abyss, his final confrontation with Duan Xiuqun didn't have any fancy moves, it was just a head-on clash, so he was able to quickly deal with the opponent. Bing or QQ browser searched for the 3 excellencies plus book titles every day. But a real battle wouldn't be like that, but like the one before him, it tested the cultivator's foundation and adaptability. Lu Yi attacked for a long time without success, and was even almost hit by Zhao Tianmu's attacks several times. And the more Zhao Tianmu fought, the more apprehensive he became. Ever since he came into contact with the 9 prefectures' Constellation Realm cultivators, he looked down on this group of people, thinking that with his strength, he could easily crush them one-on-one. But after fighting with Lu Yi, he discovered that although this Li Taibai's cultivation was only at the early stage of the Constellation Realm, he definitely had the strength of a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator. In a one-on-one battle, he had no confidence in winning. Chapter 1363. He finally understood why the youngest-looking Li Taibai could become the leader of a group of star mansions. He really did have such strength. In particular, the other party's ability to suddenly appear and disappear like a ghost. Even now, Zhao Tianmu did not know how he did it. He also had some doubts in his heart. People with such ability were usually nurtured by top-level domains. This was not in line with his previous inference. Putting away his distracting thoughts, Zhao Tianmu clearly sensed that while Li Taibai was entangled with him, the group of early-stage star mansions were rapidly approaching and would soon arrive at the battlefield. He repeatedly tried to break free from Lu Ye's entanglement and escape with the one-armed woman, but how could Lu Yi give him the chance? Lu Yi used the backup plan he had left behind to delay the other party with great difficulty. He planned to stall for time and wait for the others to arrive before swarming the other. Only in this way could he completely keep Zhao Tianmu here, even if he had to pay a price. As long as he had 10 more breaths of time, his plan would succeed. But at this time, Zhao Tianmu suddenly spoke. "Junior sister son, I will definitely come back to save you." The one-armed woman's surnamed son's expression changed from astonishment to panic. She clearly realized what her senior brother was planning and hurriedly shouted, "No." As soon as her voice fell, she was pushed by Zhao Tianmu. Ancient as she watched in horror, Lu Yi slashed down with his blade. She had been bound by the immortal binding rope and had not had a chance to break free. Did she have the strength to resist? She had thought that she could escape with her senior brother's lead, but who would have thought that her senior brother would use her as a shield in order to survive? The blade light was sharp and junior sister Sun closed her eyes. A murderous aura lingered above her head. Then, someone grabbed her hair and flung her away with all their might. Lu Yi did not expect Zhao Tianmu to be so despicable and shameless. Knowing that he could not escape, he threw the junior sister he had saved with great difficulty. His blade could have killed the one-armed woman, but the moment it was about to succeed, he changed his mind and spared her life. Looking up, Zhao Tianmu, who was no longer burdened, used some unknown method to turn into a stream of light and rush into the distance at a faster speed than before. In the blink of an eye, he had crossed hundreds to thousands of miles. Lu Yi didn't dare to hesitate. He hurriedly activated the blood escape technique. A drop of blood essence burst out of his body, and his body turned into a bloody light as he chased after Yang Kai. The backup plan he had left behind was hidden on the one-armed woman. Now that the one-armed woman had been abandoned, he could no longer use that backup plan. There was no way he could catch up to Zhao Tianmu with his own speed. Only the blood race's blood escape technique had a glimmer of hope. Zhao Tianmu, who was fleeing from afar, clearly sensed this and cursed Li Taibai for going too far. If it wasn't for the feeling of the previous confrontation, he would definitely stop and teach Li Taibai a lesson. But since he knew that Li Taibai was a strong practitioner comparable to the later stage of the Constellation realm, how would he dare to continue staying? Seeing that he couldn't get rid of Lu Yi, he made a bold decision. He took out a star boat, jumped on it, and infused it with his spiritual power. Lu Ye's heart was burning with anxiety as he watched Nie Tian from afar. He exerted even more strength to operate the blood escape art, hoping to stop Nie Tian's star boat before it accelerated. However, since Zhao Tianmu had made this decision, he naturally had his own calculations. He was certain that with Lu Ye's current speed, he wouldn't be able to stop him. Under Nie Tian's control, the star boat sped up and gradually disappeared. In the starry sky, Lu Yi came to a stop. The bloody light around him dissipated, and his expression was grim. In the end, Zhao Tianmu still managed to escape. Although he could continue the pursuit with the star boat, there wasn't much point in doing so. If he allowed Nie Tian to escape with the star boat, there was basically no hope of pursuing him. After staying in place for a long time, Feng Wujiang and the others finally arrived. The moment they saw Lu Ye's figure, they knew that the enemy had escaped. Their hearts were heavy. The one-armed woman surnamed Sun was currently being held by Nian Yuxian. Her face was pale and she was trembling. She quickly lowered her head when she sensed Lu Ye's gaze on her. Just a moment ago, she was viciously shouting that she would kill Lu Ye's entire family. But in the blink of an eye, she had fallen into the enemy's hands again. Lu Ye's ruthlessness terrified her. She didn't know what kind of fate was waiting for her. "We need to prepare to meet the enemy," Feng Wujiang said. Zhao Tianmu had escaped. If he wanted to save his junior sister, he wouldn't dare to return alone. So the next time Zhao Tianmu came, he would definitely bring a large number of people with him. Besides, he had suffered such a great loss this time. He would definitely find a way to get back at them. Right now, the enemy's realm and strength were unknown. What the 9 states could do was very limited. The worst-case scenario was undoubtedly that Zhao Tianmu would lead a group of experts over, and the 9 states would be powerless to resist. "Can we give up on the Wushuang continent?" someone suggested. Zhao Tianmu knew the location of the Wushuang continent. If he led experts over, the 9 states might not be able to resist. Giving up on the Wushuang continent would allow them to avoid a direct confrontation with the unknown enemy. "It's a plan, but it's not safe." Jian Guhong shook his head. The Wushuang continent is only a year away from the 9 states. With the help of the star boat, it'll only take a month. The enemy's realm shouldn't be weak. If we give up on the Wushuang continent, they will definitely search for it in the surrounding areas. If they find the 9 states, the situation would only worsen. If they really had to fight the unknown realm, the Wushuang continent would be the best battlefield. Giving up on it would only invite trouble. "Yi, what do you say?" Jian Guhong looked up at Lu Yi. In terms of knowledge and experience of the starry sky, no one could compare with Lu Yi. So even if they were older than him, they spontaneously regarded him as their leader. Previously, when Zhao Tianmu asked who was in charge, everyone's silence was the best way to express their attitude. Lu Yi looked at everyone and said decisively, "Summon people. It's fine if they don't come, but if they do, kill them all." Right now, there were only 10 early-stage constellations here. After all, the number was still too small, so more people were needed. There were now many constellations in the 9 states. Pulling some of them over could also strengthen the defense force here. Taking a step back, even if the enemy didn't come, the Wushuang continent was an important training ground for the cultivators of the 9 states. They also needed more constellations to guard it. This time, Meng Jie encountered a foreign constellation alone and was almost killed. If there were enough people back then, if there were more constellations here, the enemy would never be able to enter the Wushuang continent. In the starry sky, they could intercept the enemy. "Senior Sister Nian, I'll have to trouble you." Lu Yi looked at Nian Yuxian and took out the silver fish and handed it to her. Nian Yuxian nodded and incessantly stimulated the silver fish, heading in the direction of the 9 regions. We still need more information. After watching Nian Yuxian leave, Lu Yi turned to stare at the woman with a broken arm. The woman shrank her neck and tried to make herself inconspicuous. However, Lu Yi had already grabbed her and took the imperial equipment that she had left behind her. Let's go back first. 2 hours later, in the 9-5 hall. This hall was built by the cultivators of the 9 regions. Deep underground was the passage connecting the 9 regions. The reason why it was called the 9-5 hall was mainly because of the homonym of the 9 regions and the Wushuang continent. There was another larger 9-5 hall on the Li Plains of the 9 regions 4 state. This place could also be regarded as a transit point between the 2 regions. Usually, the cultivators of the 9 regions came and went, and it was the most lively place. However, at this moment, there were only a few people in the hall. The others had all been cleared. Outside the hall, it was crowded with people. They were all true lake and divine ocean cultivators of the 9 regions. Previously, when the strong enemy had arrived, they had wantonly kidnapped and killed the cultivators of the 9 regions, causing many people to suffer. Now, their own constellation had arrived and defeated the strong enemy. They had even captured one person alive and were questioning them inside. The true lake and divine ocean cultivators of the 9 regions also wanted to know where these enemies came from and what they wanted to do. More cultivators of the 9 regions received the news and came out of their hiding places. They were also rushing over, causing more and more people to gather here. Lu Yi sat upright in the hall. The woman surnamed Sun was in front of him. She knelt quietly. On her left and right, the constellations of the 9 regions stood quietly, giving her a mountain-like pressure. Her body trembled from time to time. In particular, Lu Yi, who was leaning forward slightly and speaking in a calm voice, gave her the most pressure. Lu Yi was inquiring about the situation of the region she was in. This was also the reason why he had kept this woman alive. Between the questions and answers, Lu Yi slowly grasped the situation of the region where she came from. The woman was called Sun Ying. She came from a large region called the Qinglidao world. Although it was also a large region like the 9 regions, it had a much stronger foundation. There was no sunlight in the Qinglidao world, which was good news. This was because if the other party had a sunshine realm cultivator, the 9 regions would not be able to resist once they attacked. The bad news was that they had Yu Yao. And there were 3 Yu Yao. The number of constellations under Yu Yao was not much more than the 9 regions. In fact, there were only about 500 to 600 people. However, the quality of their constellations was high. Not only were there early-stage constellations, there were also many middle-stage and late-stage constellations. The reason why the Qinglidao world had fewer constellations than the 9 regions was because it was not large and its population was not as large as the 9 regions. Such a large region was not considered very strong in the starry sky, but it was not weak as a whole. It was something that the 9 regions could not compare to. The worst news was that the sect Sun Ying came from had a Yu Yao realm. The structure of the cultivation world in the Qinglidao world was similar to that of the 9 regions. There were many sects, and the 3 Yu Yao belonged to the top 3 sections. The sect Sun Ying came from had 1 Yu Yao. Moreover, she was related to the Yu Yao realm cultivator by blood. She could be considered one of the Yu Yao's descendants. If there was no such relationship, there would not be much to worry about. In the starry sky, it was normal for cultivators to fight and kill each other after encountering each other. If they were killed, it would be due to their lack of strength and luck. If they were capable, they would take revenge. If they were not, they would endure the humiliation and take revenge when they were capable. However, Sun Ying had such a relationship. The 9 regions had to consider whether the Yu Yao realm would come to rescue Sun Ying personally and take revenge for their dead disciples. This was very likely to happen. With the current strength of the 9 regions, they could not fight against 1 Yu Yao. Chapter 1364. So, in your opinion, will your Yu Yao elder come to save you personally? Lu Ye's voice sounded in the main hall. He stared at Sun Ying, who was kneeling on the ground not far away. Sun Ying did not dare to raise her head. She tried her best to show her weakness and helplessness. She immediately said, "Yes, the ancestor will definitely come to save me. She thinks highly of me and has always said that I can inherit her mantle in the future." She was undoubtedly a smart woman. If she said that no one would come to save her, it meant that she did not have much time left. Therefore, no matter what the real situation was, she would use the Yu Yao realm as a deterrent to Lu Yi and the others. This answer was also her best choice. "If I let you go now, will anyone from the Qingli Taoist world come to my remote place?" Lu Yi asked again. Sun Ying hurriedly raised her head, revealing a beautiful face that was covered in tears. Her expression was sincere. "If you can let me go, I will definitely be extremely grateful. I will persuade the ancestor not to come here and disturb you." Lu Yi stared at her. "But I cut off your arm. You want to kill my whole family." Sun Ying looked uneasy. She stammered and said timidly, "I was ignorant and offended you with my words. I was just saying it casually. You can't take it seriously. As for my arm, it is in Zhao Tianmu's hands. When I go back, it can be reattached. Zhao Tianmu abandoned me in order to survive. If I go back, I will ask the ancestor to take his life. It will be a punishment for his reckless behavior in this world." "Very good." Lu Yi seemed very satisfied. He ordered, "Raise your head and look at me." Sun Ying did as she was told. The moment their eyes met, a fierce surge of spiritual power suddenly surged. Sun Ying's expression changed. She exclaimed, "You!" As soon as she said that, she stopped moving. Lu Yi also did not move. Feng Wujiang and the others saw this and immediately understood that Sun Ying had been forced into a state of soul strife by Lu Yi. Although this woman appeared to be very docile and well-behaved, answering all the questions without hiding anything, who knew which of her words were true and which of them were lies? Such questions and answers could only get some basic information. They could not tell if it was true or false. In order to obtain accurate information and intelligence, the only way was to pry into their souls. Just now, Lu Yi had asked if the Qingli Taoist realm would attack them again if they let her go. Sun Ying's answer was obviously not trustworthy. Everyone could see the woman's resentment. She had suffered such a great loss here. If she really had Yu Yao's support, how could she possibly let the matter rest? Everyone believed that Zhao Tianmu wouldn't have a good ending if they let her go. However, it was very likely that she would lead Yu Yao back to avenge her humiliation. Questioning was a process, but at the same time, it was also a method to slowly lower Sun Ying's vigilance. Otherwise, even with Lu Ye's strength, it would be impossible to force Sun Ying into a state of soul strife so easily, unless it was similar to how Lu Yueme had dealt with him, using some kind of special treasure. Such treasures existed in the 9 prefectures, but they did not have much effect on the constellations. Inside the hall, everyone waited quietly. Only Lu Yi and Sun Ying's spiritual energy continued to collide. On the battlefield where no one could see, Lu Yi held the soul-severing saber and was crazily attacking Sun Ying's spiritual energy defense. Her spiritual energy was protected by an extremely good quality soul treasure. Lu Yi could not deduce the exact shape of the soul treasure, but at this moment, the treasure had turned into a layer of protection, blocking Sun Ying's spiritual energy so that Lu Ye's spiritual energy avatar could not easily enter. He could only attack. The sudden change in Lu Ye's attitude made Sun Ying panic. She could feel the strength of Lu Ye's spiritual energy. Her spiritual energy avatar could only hide in her spiritual energy avatar and rely on the protection of the soul treasure. She kept begging for mercy and swore that she was telling the truth. How could Lu Yi listen to her nonsense? Not to mention that they were already on opposite sides and were destined to be irreconcilable, Lu Yi would not let this woman leave alive after what she had done on the Wushuang continent. Since Zhao Tianmu brought Sun Ying to the Wushuang continent, cultivators of the 9 regions who were hiding under orders were constantly found and captured. They were then sent to Sun Ying for her to extract their souls to improve the quality of the 10,000 soul banner. In less than half a month, the number of 9 regions cultivators who died at the hands of this woman was less than 800. It could be said that this woman's hands were stained with the blood of 9 regions cultivators. Lu Yi was very afraid. If Li Baxian and the others were found, if Hua Xi was found, he did not dare to imagine such a scene. The soul-severing saber was specially used to deal with spiritual energy, but the power of this saber gradually weakened as Lu Ye's cultivation increased. This was because Lu Yi had to face stronger enemies. Although it could still be used now, it was not as obvious as when he was in the true lake and spiritual energy sea. In particular, Sun Ying's soul treasure was extremely high grade. Lu Yi found that the power of the soul-severing saber could not break through the protection of the soul treasure. Sun Ying was still begging for mercy. "Don't hit me, I'm telling the truth. I can swear, believe me, as long as you let me leave alive, I will do anything you want." Originally, she might have had some other plans in her heart, but after Lu Yi revealed his ferocious fangs, she only had the thought of living. Seeing Lu Yi stop attacking, Sun Ying was overjoyed, thinking that he had changed his mind. Just as she was about to say something, the next moment, she saw a scene that terrified her. As Lu Ye's spiritual energy surged like a tide, a dilapidated warship appeared behind him. At first glance, the warship looked ghostly and gave people a very uncomfortable feeling. Sun Ying did not know what this warship was, but when it appeared, her spiritual energy trembled. Lu Yi landed on the deck in a flash, and as his spiritual energy surged, the dilapidated warship looked brand new. Immediately after, figures appeared on the warship. They were Qin Zong, Xiao Jianming, Zhou Xing, Su Qingwei, and the others he met on the Spectre ship. On the Ghost ship, Lu Yi had made an ingenious choice at the last moment, and as a result, he had received a gift from the Ghost ship. Since then, a dilapidated battleship had been floating in his divine sea. It was usually unremarkable, but when it was activated, it was like the Ghost ship had been reborn. Of course, this was not the real Spectre ship. Strictly speaking, it was only a copy of the Spectre ship, with some of its characteristics. Including the figures of Qin Zong and the others, they were all manifestations of Lu Ye's spiritual energy. They had no spiritual intelligence and could only move under Lu Ye's control. The crew was in position, the array hummed, the warship shook, and a thick beam of light blasted out. This bombardment was much more powerful than the slash of Lu Ye's soul-severing saber. The thick beam of light hit Sun Ying's soul treasure hard, creating huge ripples. One after another. The scene was magnificent, as if a real interstellar war had broken out. It was just that one side was attacking, and the other side was passively defending. Sun Ying was dumbfounded. In a battle of souls, victory or defeat was determined by the strength of their spiritual energy. It was normal to use soul treasures, but in this world, was there such a soul treasure? Sun Ying felt that this Li Taibai was too much of a bully. Seeing that he could not break the protection of her soul treasure, he actually took out a warship to deal with her. She felt so wrong that she wanted to cry. She was only in the early stage of the constellation realm. How could she receive such treatment? However, it was too late to cry now. With just one blow, her spiritual energy was shaken, and after 2 blows, she became dizzy. Although she had a soul treasure of good quality to protect her spiritual energy, no matter how strong a soul treasure was, it still relied on the spiritual energy. Her soul treasure was given to her by Yu Yao, and she could not use its full power. Even if it was Lu Yi himself, as long as he was willing to spend enough time, he could forcibly break it, not to mention using the Spectre ship. Under such a huge impact, how could she have a good ending? Seeing the protective barrier on the verge of collapse under the 2 blows, Lu Yi hurriedly put away the Ghost ship. He couldn't continue bombarding it. If he did, he would lose control of his strength. If Sun Ying's soul avatar was destroyed, he wouldn't be able to obtain any useful information. He turned around and slashed with his saber again. This time, it was extremely smooth. Before Sun Ying could regain her senses, the soul treasure's defense was completely broken. Lu Yi rushed forward and slashed a few times, causing Sun Ying's spiritual energy to become extremely dim, and she screamed in pain. Only then did Lu Yi pull himself together. Gritting his teeth, he constructed a divine mark on her spiritual energy. 1-point spiritual connection. Perhaps others had some secret techniques that were specially used to pry into secrets from the depths of the spiritual energy, but Lu Yi had never cultivated them. He only had one-point spiritual connection, this divine mark that could kill 1,000 enemies but also damage 1,000 oneself. Because once this divine mark was constructed, the secrets of both parties' spiritual energy would be exposed. Of course, if Lu Ye's spiritual energy was far stronger than the other parties, he could still suppress the other party's prying. But if the difference was not big, Lu Yi could not do anything. There was a difference in the strength of his spiritual energy compared to Sun Ying's, but it was not to the extent that he could completely suppress Sun Ying. In other words, when Lu Yi was prying into the secrets of her spiritual energy, Sun Ying also had some opportunities to pry into his secrets. Ever since he obtained this divine mark, Lu Yi had only activated it once. And it was when he tried to activate it in the blood-refining world. It did not feel good. Throughout the entire process, there was a lot of messy information that was uncontrollably stuffed into his mind. The process was very uncomfortable, many times worse than when he was probing into the talent tree's leaves. Since then, Lu Yi had never activated this divine rune again. But in order to pry into the Qing Li Dao world more accurately, he had no other choice. In fact, Lu Yi had thought about whether he should use soul manipulation. If he turns Sun Ying into his soul slave, he should be able to get more accurate information. But the requirements to use soul manipulation were higher. Sun Ying was a normal constellation with normal intelligence, and she was not comparable to the ignorant Dao Shisan back then. He could successfully use soul manipulation on Dao Shisan because Dao Shisan was simple-minded. But it would not work on Sun Ying. If he forced it, he might suffer a backlash. Chapter 1365. The moment the divine pattern was successfully constructed, a lot of chaotic information and images swarmed into Lu Ye's mind uncontrollably. These information and images were all Sun Ying's various experiences. How to extract useful information from such a mess was a challenge for Lu Yi, especially since Sun Ying didn't cooperate obediently. Instead, she kept resisting. At the same time, Lu Yi also had to suppress Sun Ying's soul to prevent her from prying into his secrets. This caused the information that Lu Yi could pry into to be intermittent. This time, he felt much more uncomfortable than the last time. The last time he dealt with a blood clan cultivator of the Cloud River realm, the information in his mind was limited, but this time he was dealing with a constellation. Compared to it, the Cloud River realm was like the light of a firefly compared to the brilliance of the moon. In the main hall, as everyone watched, Lu Ye's face became extremely pale, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Large beads of sweat slid down his cheeks, and his clothes were quickly soaked, as if he was enduring great pain. Sun Ying was even worse. She sat there motionless, and her eyes gradually became lifeless. She did not even notice that saliva was flowing out of the corner of her mouth, as if she was slowly becoming mentally retarded. This scene looked like a battle of souls, and both sides were injured, which made everyone feel anxious and uncertain. But in the current situation, even if they wanted to help Lu Yi, they did not know where to start, so they could only wait quietly. After a long while, a muffled groan came from Lu Ye's side. He slowly closed his eyes and took a few rapid breaths. Sun Ying still did not move, and had completely become mentally retarded. Anyone who saw it could see that this was a sign that her soul was damaged, and the damage was not ordinary. After a while, Lu Yi opened his eyes and told the people of the 9 states some of the information he had spied on. Most of what Sun Ying said was true. There were indeed hundreds of constellations in the Qing Li Dao world, and 3 Yu Yao. One of the Yu Yao was her ancestor, and Sun Ying was highly regarded by her ancestor. It was also because of this that Sun Ying was able to search for materials to improve the quality of the 10,000 soul banner under the protection of several senior brothers. Their actions would easily attract the attention of righteous cultivators, so they chose to stay in an extremely remote location. This way, they wouldn't be easily exposed. Before they found the Wu Shuang continent, there was another world domain that suffered a calamity. That world's god ocean and true lake stage cultivators were all massacred by them. The entire cultivation world's system had almost collapsed. If she did not have the backing of an expert, How could a cultivator like Sun Ying, who had just ascended to the constellation realm, receive such treatment? It was just a coincidence that they found the Wushuang continent this time. They thought that there wouldn't be too many twists and turns on this trip. Who knew that they would kick an iron plate? As a result, Zhao Tianmu was the only one who managed to escape. As for Sun Ying's promise that she would report to Yu Yao that she would not disturb the Wushuang continent as long as she was allowed to leave, it was naturally a lie. It was a lie. Based on this woman's temperament, how could she not take revenge after suffering such a huge loss this time? Especially since Lu Yi and the others were only at the early stage of the constellation realm. As long as Yu Yao came, they would not be able to stop her. After Lu Yi finished talking about all the information he had obtained, Feng Wujiang's eyes suddenly lit up. If that's the case, Yu Yao from the Qing Li Dao world will most likely not come here. Jian Guhong was confused. What do you mean? Feng Wujiang said, think about it. Since Sun Ying is highly regarded by Yu Yao, Zhao Tianmu and the others' mission was to help Sun Ying improve the quality of the 10,000 soul banner and protect her. Now that Sun Ying has fallen and Zhao Tianmu has escaped, he might not have the guts to return to the Qing Li Dao world and report to the Qing Li Dao world. Jian Guhong nodded. That makes sense. If he returns, he will definitely be held accountable. If he escapes, he will be fine. The galaxy is so big, Yu Yao from the Qing Li Dao world might not be able to capture him. Feng Wujiang smiled and said, especially when Zhao Tianmu pushed Sun Ying to little junior brother in order to escape. It would have been fine if he was just trying to protect little junior brother, but he did that at the crucial moment. How could he have the guts to return to the Qing Li Dao world? He has to return even if he doesn't want to. Lu Yi suddenly said. Feng Wujiang was stunned and looked at him in confusion. Lu Yi said, large realms with a long history such as the Qing Li Dao world have something called the soul lamp. It is refined using a special method to extract a wisp of the cultivator's spiritual energy. Every cultivator has their own soul lamp. No matter how far away the cultivator is, the soul lamp can reflect the current state of the cultivator. It can be said that the soul lamp is there when the cultivator is alive, and the soul lamp is gone when the cultivator is dead. Other than that, the soul lamp also has a tracking effect. We killed 2 of their mid-stage constellation cultivators before, so the sect that Sun Ying came from must have known that they are in danger. If Zhao Tianmu and Sun Ying don't return for a long time, they can use the soul lamp to track them down. Therefore, whether Zhao Tianmu was willing or not, he had to return to the Qing Li Dao world. As long as he had the soul lamp, he would never be able to escape. The soul lamp was a kind of protection for the disciples of the sect. At the same time, it was also a kind of restraint. It was widely used in all the major worlds in the starry sky. In the main hall, after hearing Lu Ye's explanation, the people who were still hoping for a fluke immediately understood that once Zhao Tianmu returned to the Qing Li Dao world and reported what happened here, Sun Ying's ancestor Yu Yao would definitely come personally. A big battle was inevitable. Feng Wujiang also knew that he was too optimistic just now. He said in a low voice, then according to the information that little junior brother received, how many Yu Yao will they send? Lu Yi gently massaged his temples and said slowly, there are only 3 Yu Yao in the Qing Li Dao world. It is impossible for all of them to come. At least one of them will be left behind to guard, so at most 2 will be sent. Considering the strength that we have shown before, I think only 1 Yu Yao will come. Why would they need so many Yu Yao to deal with a group of mid-stage constellation cultivators? This was good news and bad news. Yu Yao was still Yu Yao. She was not someone that the current Jojo could deal with. 1 or 2 of them did not seem to make a difference. I will deal with Yu Yao. I will leave the other constellations to you. With Lu Ye's own strength, he was naturally no match for Yu Yao. He had to thank Su Yuqing for giving him such a great gift before they parted. However, Lu Yi had no idea how powerful the red jade talisman was. He had no idea if it could help him deal with Yu Yao. After all, he had never used it before. But now that things had come to this, he had no other choice. He could only hope that the 2 red jade talismans lived up to their reputation. This was why Lu Yi did not like to rely on external forces. There were too many uncontrollable factors. Moreover, external forces were ultimately external and not one's own strength. Many external forces were expendable and could not be used repeatedly. However, it was impossible for a cultivator to completely rely on external forces for cultivation. Lu Yi himself had repeatedly used the Dragon Emperor to mobilize his forces. What about the time? How long will it take for the enemy to arrive? Half a year at most. Maybe even less. Lu Yi gave an answer. From the information he had obtained from Sun Ying, Lu Yi roughly knew the location of the Green Dawn Dao world. It was not close to the Wushuang continent. Otherwise, the Wushuang continent would not have been discovered only now. However, if Zhao Tianmu drove the planetary boat back, it would take less than a few months. If the enemy attacked, it would take about half a year. In half a year's time, the missing Moon Immortal would at most make 3 round trips to send 24 9 prefectures constellations over. Including the 9 people here and the missing Moon Immortal herself, the strength that could be gathered here was only 34 constellations. It should be enough. Since the enemy had Yu Yao, they could not bring too many constellations over. Therefore, there was still some hope for this battle. The premise was that Lu Yi could get rid of Yu Yao. Everyone, we need to send an order to the cultivators of the Jiuzhou continent who are still in the Wushuang continent. Within 3 months, everyone will leave the Wushuang continent. Other than the constellations, no one else will be left behind. Lu Yi said. Everyone nodded. Naturally, they knew the intention of Lu Ye's arrangement. If they could defeat the enemy, they could protect the important training ground of the Wushuang continent. However, if they were defeated, this world would no longer be safe. If the cultivators of the Jiuzhou continent stayed here, they would only be at the enemy's mercy. Leaving first was undoubtedly the safest way. I'll take a rest first. Lu Yi stood up and walked towards the side hall. Spying on Sun Ying's deity ocean made him mentally exhausted. Moreover, there was a lot of messy information in his mind that needed to be sorted out. This woman, how should we deal with her? Jian Guhong looked at Sun Ying, who was kneeling there like a fool. Lu Yi did not speak. He just waved his hand gently and chopped down. Jian Guhong understood. When the sword chi was released, Sun Ying's body fell limply to the ground. There was not a single drop of blood on her body. Since they had already become enemies, there was no difference in killing one more. They were not as strong as the enemy. The Jiuzhou continent would not be so naive as to let Sun Ying live so that they could make peace with the enemy. As the news spread, many cultivators of the Jiuzhou continent who had been hibernating came out of their hiding places. Some immediately set off to return to the Jiuzhou continent and did not stay any longer. Some cherished their last moments and hunted corpses everywhere to obtain battle merits. It was bustling with noise and excitement. A few days later, in the side hall of the 9-5 hall, Lu Yi suddenly felt something. He stood up and rushed outside. Just as he steadied himself, a petite and snow-white figure pounced on him from both sides. Lu Yi hugged the petite figure and allowed the snow-white figure to jump onto his shoulder. She stuck out her big tongue and licked his face. His cheeks immediately became wet. The body in his embrace trembled slightly. Why are you crying? Lu Yi reached out and stroked Yi's soft hair. He buried her head in Lu Ye's chest and shook her head vigorously, not saying a word. In front of the main hall, people came and went. Many cultivators of the Jiuzhou continent were already preparing to return to the Jiuzhou continent. When they saw this scene, they pretended not to see it and calmly walked past. After a while, Lu Yi grabbed Yi's shoulder and placed her in front of him. He looked her up and down and smiled. You're still the same. Yi pouted. I'm a spirit. I won't grow up. It's better if my Yi doesn't grow up. Lu Yi rubbed her little head. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.